Good evening. It is election night. Welcome to Your Island Vote 2021. Thanks so much for being here for our live coverage. I'm Stacey Ross.
And I'm Joe Perkins, and right out of the gates, we can tell you that Justin Trudeau's big election gamble has paid off. The Liberals will form the next government. We aren't ready quite yet to declare whether this will be a minority or a majority, but results are coming in fast right now, and we will get you that decision as soon as we're ready to call it.
Now, the polls closed here in BC 7 p.m., about half an hour after they closed in Ontario and Quebec. Let's take a look at some of those national numbers. Of course, 338 seats up for grabs tonight, 170 needed for a majority government. Still in the very early stages in many ridings, and here is a look at those leading and elected. We can see the Trudeau Liberals at 153 at this point, 121 for the Conservatives. That's the number they had in 2019. The Ndp and Jagmeet Singh sitting at 30, the Bloc Québécois 29, and so far the Greens leading in 2 ridings. We're looking at Elizabeth May in Saanich Gulf Islands and also Mike Morris in the Kitchener Centre in Ontario. And there's an important point to make here. As polls closed, there were long lineups at many polling stations here on Vancouver Island and elsewhere in the country. In some Toronto ridings, voters were facing waits of 2 hours after the polls closed. And keep in mind, ballots at those polling stations cannot be counted until all votes have been cast at that polling station. And that may delay some results in some key ridings tonight.
Our team is spread out across the island as we keep an eye on all 7 island ridings. We also have our political correspondent, Rob Shaw, in studio with us here at CHEK. And from the Oh Boy Studios in Vancouver, we have with us Katie Merrifield, the president of Wellington Advocacy, and Mo Amir, host of the wildly popular podcast, This is Van Color. This is our panel, folks. Get used to these faces. They will be with us all night. And Rob, let's start with you. You can kick us off tonight. We've got lots of results coming in. We know that Justin Trudeau will be the next prime minister. Your reaction to what we've seen so far?
Well, the most important election in Canada's history, according to the Prime Minister, has returned results that are very similar to the ones that we had before we went to the polls. So I think there's going to be some questions here about whether or not you consider this a victory for Justin Trudeau. It is not the majority government that he wanted. He still gets the chance to remain prime minister. He's going to require the support of the New Democrats, at the very least, to stay in power. Does he remain as prime minister? Can he continue to govern? How long does another minority government last? Those are the questions that you start to ask as soon as you see these numbers and wonder what we just went through for the past 4 to 5 weeks and $600 million to return results that are very similar to before we even started.
All right, Katie, to you now. Are you surprised at what you're seeing so far?
No, I'm not really. And I would like to take this opportunity off the top to be uncharacteristically gracious and congratulate all of my Liberal friends whom for the last 30 days have been informing me how much they despise me and my coverage. But look, I will drive this point home. This election gamble does not pay off for the Liberals unless they secure a majority. Otherwise, if it is too close to what transpired in 2019, then we just spent $600 million on an election campaign about nothing. And if that is the case, and we are seeing kind of the seat count is a consensus of the aggregate polls so far, if that's what we end up with, you know, I don't think Trudeau is going to lead the Liberals into the next election, and quite frankly, I don't think he's going to want to either.
Mo, what about you? Anything stand out so far? Perhaps the NDP progress report. They're elected or leading in 29 ridings right now. What are you keeping an eye on?
My popcorn is still hot. Like, I thought we were going to get a little more suspense at it tonight. I'm a little disappointed, to be honest with you. I mean, it looks like we're getting the results that we sort of predicted. It looks like it's going to be a Liberal minority. I think Katie's right on the money in terms of where does Trudeau go from here? Is he still the leader? I think anything short of a majority is a failure, considering how ahead they were in the polls. But again, you look at the Conservatives, I don't think this is a win for them. I know they were trying to spin that as a win. A Liberal minority would be a Conservative win, but they were winning at one point in the election. And I think the real inflection point of this election was where the Conservatives started to decline. It was over gun policy. And then in the last weekend, Erin O'Toole kind of went MIA, at least in front of the media. You know, they were winning this at one point, and it's really surprising to see how they couldn't get that momentum back.
We will check in with Katie and Mo throughout the night. They'll be a big part of this broadcast, so we wanted to welcome in. Thank you for being here. Rob, of course, you'll be here for the whole night as well. Let's bring the rest of our CHEK team in, though. We have reporters spread out across the island. We want to go first to the Liberal campaign headquarters of Ndp McDonald. We still don't know the outcome of the riding in Victoria. Laurel Collins, the incumbent, looking to hold on to that seat. But obviously, Jasmine, this is great news for folks where you are. I'm sure they're happy with these early results.
Yeah, Joe, there's a lot of excitement here at the Victoria Liberals headquarters. There's not as many people here as usual just because of the pandemic, but you can definitely feel the energy and the buzz in the air. And I did actually hear some claps when they first heard the news of a projected Liberal government. Now, of course, we don't have the final results yet for this particular riding, the Victoria riding. So there is a lot of anticipation about that as we wait to hear whether Liberal candidate Ndp McDonald can take the seat from the incumbent NDP candidate Laurel Collins. The riding has been held by the NDP for the past 5 elections, so it will be a bit of a tough one, with Greens in the past few elections coming quite close. The last time it was held by the Liberals was in 2006, when David Anderson was the Victoria MP, and he was elected 4 times. But the Liberals are hopeful this year, since Ndp McDonald actually doubled the Liberal share of the vote in the last federal election in 2019. And every seat matters in whether this will be a majority or minority government, so we'll be keeping a close eye here as the results start to trickle in. Joe? Yeah,
and we just saw, I mean, it's so early, but only 3 polls reporting, but Ndp McDonald out to a small lead early, but Stacey, this, in terms of the 7 island ridings, I mean, we still have a bit of time until we know who's running away with this thing. Absolutely, and lots of ridings to keep our eyes on, particularly in talking about the Green Party, which may be the story of this election for folks on Vancouver Island. One of those ridings we're paying a particular attention to is Saanich Gulf Islands, of course, where former Green Party leader Elizabeth May is looking to win for a 4th time. Our April Lawrence is with Elizabeth May and other Green Party candidates tonight. April.
Yeah, Stacey, the mood here at Green Party headquarters here in Victoria has picked up a little bit of a party going on there, as much as you can have a party in the middle of a pandemic. But people's spirits here seem pretty high. Elizabeth May, I think last I checked, 1 poll reporting leading in her riding. No surprise there. She had a sizable win in the last election with nearly 50% of the vote. So they're hoping to continue that momentum and continue that support this time around. Now, Elizabeth May is here. She arrived a short time ago, and we're being told she's going to split her time half with the live event going on behind me. They also have a room off to the side that they've decorated. That is a live Zoom event with Green Party volunteers. So she's splitting her time between those 2 events. We have other candidates here as well from Victoria, Nesquimalt, Saanich, Souk, hoping to accomplish something here tonight. The Green Party did finish 2nd in both of those ridings in the last election. Can they hang on to that support with all of that this party has been through with its new leader? It remains to be seen. They seem hopeful, they seem excited, and we'll just have to stay tuned and see how things go from here. Lots of excitement, and you mentioned that Kitchener Centre seat that they're leading in. I know it's early on, but they've got to be feeling good about that right now, and obviously keeping a close eye on Nanaimo Ladysmith as well.
Great, thank you, April. All right, Elizabeth May leading in Saanich Gulf Islands. Again, still early. The Greens are coming off their best performance ever in 2019 with 45% of the popular vote here on Vancouver Island, 6.5% across the country with 3 seats to show for it. And the Greens, they want to hang on to the 2 seats they had when this election was called, the 2nd seat being Paul Manley's seat in Nanaimo Ladysmith. That was challenged both by the Conservatives and the Liberals. Sky Ryan is in that riding tonight. She's keeping her eye on Paul Manley's headquarters. Sky, how are things going where you are?
Well, I can tell you the mood is very festive. The beer and the wine are already flowing. The band is already playing. Paul Manley's campaign seems very confident after internal polling suggests that he is in advance. I just came from polling stations, though, Joe, and the long lineup suggests the voter turnout will be strong in this election, and the resolve that these voters feel to elect who they believe represents them is very strong. There were parents holding car seats and babies on on people's hips, that you could see they were entrenched. They were waiting a long time tonight. So we could be here a while before we know the exact polling results. As the Conservatives and the NDP have held this riding before, it is considered to be a three-way race, and it could be a very tight race for Paul Manley. He won by 6,000 votes last time, but this is a very, very different election. 2 years have passed since his by-election win and his general election win, and we have an opioid crisis, we have a homelessness crisis, housing affordability prices have risen by 20% in the last year. People are living in campers and out of cars. So a lot of people feeling very entrenched in their community, including, it must be noted that there was a very large anti-vaccination, anti-passport rally at the Nanaimo Hospital just weeks ago, and it was attended by 500 plus people. So the PPC got 1,000 votes in the last general election. They're expected to gain a very large vote this time. Will it be enough to knock out the Conservatives from that three-way race? It's hard to tell. They've had this riding many times and for a long time. So this will be one to watch, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds. Joe.
Thank you, Sky. It's already a nail-biter. Do we have that board one more time to see the results coming in Nanaimo Ladysmith? About 200 votes separate Lisa Marie Barron and Paul Manley right now. Currently, the incumbent sitting in third place. Only 20 polls reporting, but this is exactly what Sky just told us. It was going to be a tight three-way race between the NDP, the Conservatives, and the Greens right now in third. You know, nationally, the Greens are elected and leading in 2 seats, but Nanaimo Ladysmith, not one of them at this point in the night.
I just want to bring in Rob Shaw here. Rob, now we've talked about the infighting, the chaos in the party nationally. Anna Paul, the Green Party leader, making a surprise impromptu visit to Vancouver Island just this past weekend. How much has that chaos impacted Paul Manley and could potentially have him tossed out of his seat there in Nanaimo Ladysmith?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer right now because Paul Manley's basically run an independent campaign. He hasn't needed the leader. He hasn't needed the money from the party. He's just done his own thing, as has Elizabeth May, but he doesn't have the name recognition that she does. So when you look at a riding like Nanaimo Ladysmith, you start to look at kind of the way that it has folded out in the past. North Nanaimo, that kind of Dover Bay waterfront area, is typically a strong Conservative area. Greens pick up some votes there as well. We have a weird Green Conservative kind of split that sometimes happens. Central Nanaimo, a bit of a fight. South Nanaimo, New Democrat that Greens have taken over, including Gabriola and Protection Islands. And then you get down to some rural areas the Conservatives think they can pick up, and then a fight again in Ladysmith. So there's the potential here that if the Greens soften a bit, some of those votes go to the NDP. They regain territory that they hold provincially, and they're very popular in this riding provincially. But the Conservatives have a base here, 24 to 28%, that they pull in every time, that they're trying to build upon to get over that hump into first place.
It also makes you wonder what took so long for the leader to come out to Vancouver Island. I mean, it was just this past weekend that we saw Anna Paul for the first time. Do you think that the party thought to itself, all right, we're in trouble here, we need to get the leader out, try to get some sort of last-ditch push before Election Day?
I don't think the leader does anything to help Paul Manley, to be honest with you. The only thing that mattered here was that she did well enough in the national leaders debate that people don't have to feel embarrassed to vote Green. And that is if you don't support Paul Manley but you support the Greens, you need to feel okay in voting Green. Otherwise, your vote is going to wander. So I think she accomplished that in the debate, didn't move any needles by being here. It was kind of a bit of an awkward visit, actually. Wasn't as enthusiastic as you might have thought it would be. And I don't necessarily think Paul Manley had to come down to Victoria to be with her. She didn't go up to be with him. And I don't know that that's moved Nanaimo Ladysmith voters in any way, but we'll watch to see how it goes tonight.
Yeah, we sure will, Rob. Thanks so much for that. Now, let's bring it back to the Victoria riding, and we heard from Jasmine Ball, we heard Nikki MacDonald there, and our first look in the very early stages of results there actually had the Liberal Nikki MacDonald leading, but you know the incumbent is Laurel Collins. She left her job as City Councillor for Victoria to run for the NDP. Now, the biggest threat could be from the Liberals tonight. Mary Griffin has more on that for us. Mary is at Laurel Collins headquarters. Mary?
Well, it's interesting, Stacey. You know, they really don't want people inside the campaign office here at Laurel Collins, but I poked my head in before they shooed me out. Laurel Collins is here with her family. I've been in asking her campaign manager a few questions throughout the course of the evening, but you can definitely feel the tension, is definitely ratcheted up, particularly because there's 234 polls in this riding. It encompasses Victoria, Oak Bay, and the southwest portion of Saanich, and 3 of those polls are reporting, as you mentioned, with Liberal Nikki MacDonald in a very slight early lead. These are early. It's far too early to call anything, but, we could have a fight on our hands here. This riding has traded places between the Liberals and NDP for decades now. The NDP have had a firm hold on it for a long time, but I can tell you right now, things are feeling very much more intense inside Laurel Collins' campaign office right now.
Thank you. And we do have more breaking news to pass along. We can declare now a Liberal minority government. So again, as we talked about off the top, we spent $600 million and the last month plus in this campaign. And really not too much has changed, projecting a Liberal minority government. And I'm wondering if we can take a look at the national boards one more time at this point and see how things are playing out there. We currently have leading and elected 156 for the Liberals. Of course, 170 seats needed for a majority government. We see the Conservatives at 122, the Bloc 29, 28 for Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, and leading or elected the 2 Green Party members there.
Let's see if we can get Mo and Katie back in here now that we can call this thing a Liberal minority. Justin Trudeau gambled. It paid off. Let's get their reaction to this. Katie, is this vindication for Justin Trudeau? He was criticized for the last 5 weeks for calling this election, and here we go. 35 days later, it's another Liberal minority. Vindication? What do you think?
I think it's vindication potentially for Aaron O'Toole. There is a reason that they were trying to sell holding the Liberals to a minority as a win. He needs to bring that back to the party and to the base, potentially in order to stay on. So the fact that now that has been confirmed, I think O'Toole and his team may be breathing a little easier right now.
Mo, I'm trying to remember what your prediction was. I think it was somewhere around 145 seats for the Liberals, something like that. Are you surprised at what we're looking at right now? 155 leading and elected?
No, I'm not surprised at all. We'll see. There's still a lot of close ridings, and we can still there's still a lot of votes to be counted, especially in Metro Vancouver and even in Ontario. So this can swing in a lot of different ways. I just wanted to point it out. I forgot right off the top of the bat. Can we just celebrate that Maxime Bernier got crushed in Beauce, Quebec? It's official. He's done. I don't have to talk about him for a little while. That's a big win, and it proves that we're not in the worst timeline.
All right, Mo, and I know I heard you on BC Poly Live saying that your dad was predicting a Conservative sweep here. Mo Sr., is he screaming at the television set right now?
He is not replying to my text messages. I don't know where he is. He might have turned off the TV and gone to bed and maybe PVR'd this for later viewing. I'm not sure.
I'm just glad you said the riding Beauce, Bernier's riding, because we were talking about how to pronounce this thing. I said it was bocce at one point, so I'm glad you said it first. All right.
I YouTubed it.
Did you YouTube it? Good for you. Let's turn our attention to the Conservatives. Vancouver Island, it wasn't too long ago, it was a Conservative stronghold. Hasn't been that way for many elections. But Andy Neil is out on the peninsula tonight. That's where David Bush, running in Saanich Gulf Islands. As of last check, he's currently in second place behind Elizabeth May, but Andy Neil is standing by with the Conservative candidate there. Andy.
That I am, Joe. Thanks very much. And Stacey, so David Bush is joining me right now as we're here at the Seasider Farm and Cider House in Saanich. And David, we just got word that it will be a minority government for the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau. I just wanted to get your reaction from the Conservative perspective on how this has played out nationally.
Well, I think it's no real surprise that it came out as a minority. The interesting piece is we've got basically the same government, the same number of seats per party as we had before when Trudeau dissolved it because he wasn't able to, or he felt he wasn't able to work with the opposition parties. The only difference is now the country is more divided and more angry and more polarized than it was 36 days ago.
And locally, we just looked on my cell phone at some of the early results here in the Saanich Gulf Islands. Elizabeth May out in front with 39% of the vote. Yourself at 24, sitting second. What do you make of how this campaign was over 36 days for yourself, and what kind of inroads you were hoping to make on Elizabeth May and the Green Party?
I'm really happy with my team and how well we did during this campaign. We won a We ran a great, strong, positive campaign, and it's about setting the ground and moving the bar forwards. And if with the numbers, it's only 5 polls in so far, but I'm really happy with what we've done, what we've accomplished, and we've pulled that spread in much, much tighter. Looking forward to seeing where those numbers go over the course of the night, but very happy at the moment.
What were some of the things that you heard from voters during this campaign?
It was always coming back to those 3 key issues. It was the cost of living. It was, will my kids be able to live here? Will I be able to keep living here? It was the health care. Do we have, where are we going to get the doctors? Nobody has a doctor. And that is a problem because without the family physicians, they keep us healthy. And that means we have a better quality of life. And it also means, though, we wind up saving money on our healthcare system because it's much easier to prevent or catch something early than to have to try to deal with complications later on.
Well, we're outside the pavilion right now at the Cider House because the volunteers of your campaign are here. What do you want to say to them when you get inside?
I'm going to be thanking them for a job well done and for all the hard work. I could not have asked for a better team, and looking forward to getting in there because tonight it's about them. One of the big issues with COVID, obviously it's affected the campaign through and through. We can't have the big celebration at the end like we've had other years, so it's a quieter. This is for the team, this is for the volunteers to say thank you for all your hard work.
David, appreciate the time, and thanks for doing this. All the best tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, David Bush, the Conservative candidate here for the Saanich Gulf Islands, as we wait the results of this riding here on Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands here this evening. Elizabeth May has held it since 2011, hoping to do so tonight, but the Conservatives trying to make inroads on that from the results from 2019. Back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Andy, thanks so much for that. And we can tell you that Conservative Party leader Erin O'Toole has won his seat, so he's secure, and he, for the most part, for the moment anyhow, he will be carrying on as leader of the Conservative Party. All right, let's take a look at some other results from Vancouver Island. Now, challengers will be hard-pressed to beat Laurel. Well, Laurel Collins here, that's not the board I was expecting, but I can tell you that she has overtaken Nikki McDonald now with 40% of the popular vote. We're looking at 9 polls reporting of 234, so still a long way to go as far as tabulating results here. But for the moment, incumbent Laurel Collins leading the way over the Liberals' Nikki McDonald. All right, let's take a look now at Saanich Gulf Islands. There we see Elizabeth May at 41%. Again, she has held this seat since 2011, and she looks well on her way to winning a 4th straight election.
There's a Esquimalt Saanich Suk, Randall Garrison looking to be re-elected there. Laura Ann Frost with the Conservatives in 2nd place, and the Colwood councillor Doug Kobayashi in 3rd place. As we go through some of these results, we'll keep on putting them up on your screen so you can get a snapshot of where we're at right now. Let's get Rob back in here for some more reaction. Rob, we spent a long time talking about what this election was about. And I think here on the island, we tried really hard to figure out why or what issues, would drive the votes on the South Island. Did you think we got anywhere there? I mean, you look at, Cowichan, Malahat, Langford, for instance. Was there one issue in that riding, or maybe in all the ridings, that was top of mind when people went to the ballots?
That's difficult, Joe. I mean, this is an election dominated by COVID fatigue. Throughout this campaign, we had major things happen, like COVID passports were announced by BC, mask mandates returned, all sorts of things happened, and people were going back to school. People were paying attention to their lives rather than the platforms which came out from the parties. I think affordability, which is generally kind of an urban-suburban issue on things like housing prices, things like your cell phone bill, things like your rent and your rental rebates, which the NDP promised at one point. Those maybe had the potential to cut through. The parties had a lot of housing promises on the table, but we're seeing the island continue to sort of vote so far very early on in the way that it has in the past. And so that may lead you to believe that people are comfortable with their incumbents. People like sometimes on the island voting for parties that aren't in power in Ottawa, just so you can kind of give Ottawa the old kick in the teeth here on the island. Maybe a little bit of payback for the fact elections are often called before our polls even close. But we don't often, respond to the national trends. So it's hard to extrapolate which issues really landed here on the island as hard as they might have nationally.
It was interesting looking at the polling results as we carried on through this election campaign, Rob, because it seemed like if you pick an issue, you pick a leader that would best manage that issue. If you're talking about the economy and money management, it was O'Toole and the Conservatives. If you talk about COVID response, it was the Liberals. You talk about housing and affordability, maybe it's the NDP. Now, it seems to me that would lead you to vote as you voted all along, since there was no clear leader that was able to manage all of those big issues at once. What do you think?
And I think also the issue is change as well. People get into the ballot box and they just kind of, they freeze up. They ask themselves, do we really want to veer the country into another party, into an unknown at a time when we're in the middle of a crisis? That was always the issue the Liberals were counting on, was that no matter what else we talked about, you just froze up. You froze up in fear at the last minute and said, well, you know what, I might not be happy with Justin Trudeau entirely. He might not have fulfilled all the promises that he said. I might not even like the things he's doing, but I think maybe I don't want to change. And that is kind of one of the senses you get from tonight, that people just want to carry on the way things were, and that leads to the question of whether Justin Trudeau faces any blowback for trying to change that in the first place.
If there's anywhere the Conservatives might gain some ground, it might just be in the two ridings on the mid to north parts of the island, and that is where Dean Stoltz is working tonight, covering those two ridings. Let's check in with Dean now.
Well, guys, just starting to see some of the early results come in here on two ridings on the North Island. Courtney Alberni with incumbent Gord Johns up against newcomer Mary Lee, and it's a tight race early on. We'll see how that plays out tonight. And in North Island, Powell River, incumbent Rachel Blaney up against Shelley Downey, Port McNeill councillor who's running for the second time. Blaney won by about 3,300 votes in the last election, and another tight race shaping up in that riding tonight. None of the NDP candidates are actually having a party, but we're told we might have availability with them later on tonight via Zoom. But Gord Johns people telling me that with many special ballots yet to be counted after tonight, they might not even know or want to talk about the results today or tonight at all. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Dean. Okay, let's take a look at Courtney Alberni right now. Gord Johns, a pretty strong lead. Again, only 50 polls reporting, but he's out in front of Mary Lee, the Conservative candidate there, and the Liberals in third place, and Suzanne Lawson currently in fourth place.
And here we see the North Island, Powell River, and the incumbent there, Rachel Blaney. We know that John Duncan, Conservative, held that seat for 20 years, but it looks like Rachel Blaney, with 51 polls reporting, has a comfortable lead there, 42% of the popular vote. She got 38% of the popular vote in 2019, compared with Shelley Downey of the Conservatives, who finished up last year with 33%, which is where she sits at this juncture.
Okay, let's take a look at the Vancouver Island popular vote, NDP. Perhaps no surprise there. A lot of people thought that the NDP would do well on the island. They historically have, and that appears to be the case right now in terms of the popular vote. The NDP sitting just ahead of 36%, with the Conservatives just shy of 29%. The Liberals and the Greens trailing in third and fourth.
Yeah, and again, that green number there, far, far lower than it was in 2019, when it was 45% on the island. Here's once again a look at the national seat count. Leading or elected, 156 for the Liberals, 122 for the Conservatives. We've got the Bloc and the NDP both at 29, and 2 seats there for the Green Party and 0 for the People's Party of Canada.
Okay, and there is the BC seat count right now, elected and leading. We are going to bring Mo and Katie back in here now for some reaction on what we're seeing early. Let's talk about, and Katie, we'll start with you. Let's talk about the Green Party. I mean, what do we make of this? Do you think this is some voters, maybe perhaps PPC pulling in some voters, frustrated with COVID, frustrated with vaccine passports? What do you make for this? I was going to say slight drop-off, but we'll wait to see if it's slight.
Yeah, first I want to talk about the PPC. I've been clear on this show before that about how I feel about this political party. I think they're a dangerous fringe. They're xenophobic, inflammatory, and they've been running under this leader who's basically an unhinged disruptor under the guise of truth to power and freedom. However, we need to look at how this party is polling, right? They were 3 to 4% last time around. We've seen national polls 10 to even 20% in some provinces, and they're not just pulling from the Conservative Party. They're obviously pulling from disaffected Greens, maybe disaffected Liberals, people who are just, pissed off about all the reasons that you just outlined and want to park their vote elsewhere. In terms of the Greens' performance, I continue to go back to their executive. This is a party executive that chose to play sandbox politics, to act, infantile and moronic in terms of their execution, which is such a tragedy given the tremendous leadership that they had in Ndp Paul. But, you know, it's great to see they did pick up the second seat. My colleague Jillian Oliver, who works for the Provincial Greens, was really supporting Mike Morris. So I'm happy that he brought that home for her, at least.
All right, Mo, I'm going to ask you about the Conservative Party and the Jason Kenney factor and the management of COVID in Alberta and that all playing out in this last week. How much did that hurt the Conservative campaign?
Oh, I think it definitely hurt the Conservative campaign. I mean, you look at the home stretch of this election, Erin O'Toole's not taking any questions from the media. That's when you want attention. That's when you want eyeballs. Certainly you don't want to rock the boat, but for him to turtle in front of the media because of what was happening in Alberta and not wanting to answer questions about Kenney made a huge difference. Now, did it necessarily affect voters and how they felt about the Conservative brand? I'm not so sure. I mean, I'm sure there'll be think pieces about this, but I think voters are smart enough to differentiate Alberta's Conservatives from the Conservative Party as a whole, and I'm not sure it had a huge influence because this does seem to track with what we were seeing even prior to Kenney's announcement of bringing in new restrictions and effectively how their government had failed.
I'm just looking at the national seat count right now as it stands with the Liberals 157 and the Conservatives 121. That's exactly where we were at 2 years ago on election night. It looks like the NDP picked up 5 seats right now, but results still coming in. Rob, here's a question for you. Actually, all three of you can jump in when you want, but Rob, we'll start with you. I think a lot of people over the last few weeks, all of our coverage, you know, we were reporting on what the pollsters were telling us, and they were telling us that this was shaping up to be a two-horse race between O'Toole and Trudeau. And here we are on election night, and there's people up and down the island tuning in, and they're looking at the results and going, well, hold on a second. This isn't a two-horse race. I mean, Trudeau's got this minority government, and it's not even close. How do you explain that?
Well, people lie to pollsters.
Yeah, is that it? I mean, is that it?
People express their greatest dreams and desires to pollsters, and then they go in, and then I mentioned that body part I talked about previously, your nose. You get in there, you freeze up, you sort of think, I don't really know if I know that I kind of want change, but and you go with your incumbent, or you go with your local party, you go with who you had before. Polling is difficult. I think, you know, look, you have to continue to kind of view it in aggregate. You got to put it all together. You got to follow trends, and even then, it tightens up right at the end. It tightens up when people have to vote, when they have to actually take the stubby pencil and make the mark, and they go back. They go back to the way their family voted. They go back to the way they voted. They sometimes fall back without a real push to change. And I think we saw that, and I think that's where we are tonight. Is it just a feeling from people that maybe they expressed preference earlier and flirting with another idea or another way of going, and here they are back where they started?
Well, something people definitely feel comfortable doing in Saanich Gulf Islands is electing Elizabeth May, and we can go back now to April Lawrence, who's standing by with Elizabeth May in Stowe. Nope, we had her, and now she's gone. All right. Sorry, well, I'm listening to my director here, waiting for some instruction about going to Elizabeth May, but we will get to her as soon as we possibly can. Oh, we do. Here she is. Let's go. April Lawrence,
Sorry,
Elizabeth
hi.
May. Hey.
She wanted to talk, and then she said, no, I'm not going to talk, and then she wanted to talk.
TV, right? We're here, and Elizabeth wants to talk. Thank you so much for joining us, Elizabeth. Leading in your riding tonight, Kitchener Centre as well. How are you thinking, looking at the way the votes are coming in tonight?
Well, I'm really, my heart is in Naima Ladesmith right now, because I'm quite confident Paul will pull it off, but it's very tight right now, and it's still early in the counting. But to go back to Parliament with 3 MPs will certainly be great, because the minority Parliament leaves a very narrow margin at this point between the Liberals and the Conservatives, and it's really too early to say what the seat count is going to look like. But that's all important in a minority Parliament, and the role we play as Greens going back into a minority Parliament is really positive and constructive for everyone. So the more Greens elected, the better, and obviously these are all dear friends who are running, so my fingers are crossed every which way.
What do you make of the Liberal minority?
Well, it's not a surprise. I think the really great news for Canadians is that Justin Trudeau's gamble did not pay off. He thought he could call a snap election in the fourth wave of a pandemic when, under the fixed election date law, our next election was supposed to be October 16th, 2023. And he thought he could grab a majority government. And I'm sure his caucus and his party management is not going to be happy with these results. They're losing, they're losing MPs, let's be honest, they're friends of mine. Lenore Zan in Cumberland Colchester and I were working on her environmental racism bill. I'm saddened to see some parliamentarians lose tonight because Justin Trudeau thought the gamble was worth it. And he also, what's happening now in terms of the pandemic, obviously the Taliban falling, Afghanistan falling to the Taliban the day the writ dropped, there are going to be a lot of regrets and reviews within the Liberal Party. And the Conservative Party is also having its regrets. So we are in the midst of some reckoning around politics and power grabs, and I think what really matters to me is that when Canadians wake up tomorrow morning, they feel as though, well, that was pretty good. A few of them got their comeuppance, good enough.
As far as the Green Party last election, incredibly strong showing, especially on the South Island, a couple really close second place finishes. The numbers aren't coming in looking as strong tonight. How much do you think that the conflict within the party played a factor in this election with voters?
I never bought the line that there was a conflict within the party that was driving things down. We had an awful lot of leaked stories that were covered in the media as if they were accurate. And I wasn't in a position to start arguing with phantoms, leaked stories, claims by unnamed sources. That turmoil in the media definitely hurt us. How much it's really what was going on within the party, I think, is something that we will have a reckoning, and we'll be more public with that reckoning after this election.
A lot of talk about your new leader, Ndp Paul. Where do you think she goes from here, and the leadership of this party in general?
I think that's really her decision now. I'm not going to, it would be really unfair to everyone concerned to jump to recommendations or conclusions. Ultimately, the membership of the Green Party is always in charge. The leader, when I was leader, I was never the boss. The job of the leader of the Green Party is a service role to the membership in the way our Constitution is structured. For instance, we don't allow the leader under our Constitution to tell MPs how they're supposed to vote. We have a very different structure. So our members have an automatic leadership review coming up. That's not going to be unusual. I went through them often. But it's really premature to imagine what happens next. It doesn't look as though Ndp Paul can win Toronto Centre, but that was the conventional wisdom when she announced that she wanted to run there. It's where she was born, and she had a deep commitment to that community. But it's you couldn't pick a harder riding than a Liberal stronghold like Toronto Centre.
Just lastly, climate change became sort of the key issue this election. No matter how the Green Party fares tonight, do you see that as a victory, or do you see it as all the other parties have now jumped on to climate change and fighting climate change? It's obviously important to Canadian voters. Do you think that pushes the Green Party aside in any way?
I really don't care about the Green Party in the context of the climate crisis. What I care about is my grandchildren's future, and I'm not saying that to sound lofty. I'm terrified of the science I'm looking at right now, and I wouldn't mind a bit if one of the other parties stole our platform and the targets we've chosen and delivered on them, if it meant the annihilation of the Green Party, but the survival of human civilization in the balance. No, I'm not so selfish or driven by the future of my party compared to the future of my grandchildren. So all the parties are talking about climate change, but only the Greens are actually talking about what must be done. So again, my huge sigh of relief about Justin Trudeau's gamble not paying off is that instead of 4 years before the next election, we have a chance to push harder in a minority parliament to get the parties to do what's required by the science. That's what's key.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, back to you guys.
Thanks so much, April. And Rob Shaw wanted to weigh in quickly on what Elizabeth May had to say there.
Well, I mean, with all due respect to Ms. May, I don't think the media made up the fact that the Green Party took their own leader to court. They didn't make up the fact that a Green MP defected from the party. They didn't make up the fact that there was an implosion inside the party over the leader's executive assistant. They didn't make any of that up. The Green are trending down in their popular vote nationally. In BC, on the island, in Victoria, the candidate has fallen, and it's very early, to 4th place from a strong showing in 2nd last time. So Sure. Okay. You know, there were some sources and what have you, but I don't think you can look at the results tonight and say that that's a spectacular showing by any mean for the Greens. We are in a first past the post system. It's possible the Greens end up with 3 seats tonight. I'm sure they'll take that and say, way to go. We've, you know, green wave. But overall, not an impressive showing so far with the Greens. We'll see as the results come in on the island if that improves.
All right, we are expecting Justin Trudeau to speak tonight at 9:30 our time, so we're about 50 minutes away from that. We are keeping an eye on the riding of Victoria. Do we have the results? Let's take a look and see how things are faring in Victoria right now. There they are, Laurel Collins still in the lead by about 600 votes right now. Nikki MacDonald, the Liberal candidate there. Many people believed it was either going to be Laurel or Nikki who walked away with this seat. Looks like right now the incumbent has it. But they will be celebrating at the Liberal Party headquarters, and that is where Jasmine Bala is standing by with more. Jasmine, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, the results are still pouring in, but of course, like you mentioned, there is something to celebrate. There has been a projected Liberal minority government, and I'm here with Howard Markson, a campaign volunteer. And Howard, what can you tell me about how are you feeling, you know, minority Liberal government?
Well, obviously, we're very pleased that the networks have declared a Liberal government. We are still hoping, of course, that there will be enough seats that it might make a majority, but we're certainly pleased about that. You know, some people are saying, well, it was a waste that the election was called. It's never a waste when the people have a chance to voice their opinions and decide who they want to lead them. So we think that this is still supportive of the Liberal Party, and we're pleased with that.
Great, and let's talk a little bit about this particular riding. So, of course, right now, you know, really early results, preliminary results. We're hearing Laurel is currently in the lead, and Nikki MacDonald is following really closely behind. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there were some lineups, so some of the polls have closed a little bit late, and some of the results are a little bit slow coming in. What we are buoyed by is that in most of the polls that we've seen, the Liberal support and the Nikki MacDonald support is improving from the last time around. So we feel that this is a very, very competitive race, and there are a lot of the polls that are still reporting are ones that we would hope to do very well in. So it's a bit early, and they are slow coming in. They're not quite pouring in, as you've indicated, but they are coming in, and we're hoping that in the end it'll be tight. And as you know, the mail-in ballots in Victoria have exceeded any other riding in all of the country, so we may well not know tonight, and it may be several days before we really have a winner declared here.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said trickling in. That's more like it. So let's talk a little bit about those numbers. You know, I have a few down here that there's about 99,000 registered voters in the riding, and those mail-in ballots that you mentioned, it's about 12%, just over 10% of that population. So about 12,000 are mail-in ballots. So do you think that's going to really change things?
Well, we feel that the ballots will probably support the Liberals quite strongly. So if indeed it's still very tight at the end of tonight, we feel good about our chances on the mail-in ballot. So we are certainly not giving up any kind of hope in the fact that Laurel might be in a slight lead at this point. We think we've still got a lot of support that's going to come through, including at the mail-in ballots for sure.
And the last question for you, Howard, is why are you feeling so optimistic this time around about Nikki MacDonald's chances? Of course, the last few elections, the Greens have come in second. So why so optimistic this time around?
Well, the Green support does seem to have really collapsed. So where is that support moving? We feel a lot of it is moving to the Liberals. It helps that the climate plan that the Liberals have had has been a very popular one, and many, Andrew Weaver and others have come out supporting that plan. So we think that if there were those people who might have supported the Greens last time, they may well be moving over to the Liberals. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Howard. I'm here at Nikki MacDonald's campaign headquarters with Howard Markson. Thank you. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Jasmine. And you mentioned the mail-in ballots. Those will not be counted until tomorrow. The results could be several days coming in. The reason for that is those mail-in ballots have to be validated. So Each one of those mail-in ballots has a tracking number on it, and folks at Elections Canada have to look at that tracking number and make sure that somebody who mailed in a ballot didn't also vote today. So that does take some time. And of course, the other factor is the advanced polling in BC, up 13% this year, over 800,000 casting their advanced polls. But those numbers are tallied tonight.
And that's a good point to just touch on, Rob. Maybe walk through our viewers through logistics here. Long lineups. A lot of people have seen lineups right across the country. Polls closed at 7 here, but even at some of our polling stations, people were still lined up after 7 o'clock. If they were there before 7, they get to vote. Those votes all get counted tonight, correct?
That's right, yeah. But it's the mail-in ballots inside a riding where you've mailed it back into your riding or you dropped it off in person. Those don't get counted, as Stacey was saying, until tomorrow. It takes time, and there's an Election Act law that mandates that they have to be sent to the right place. So in some ridings tonight, and you can find a useful guide on the Elections Canada website, but in some ridings, there are thousands and thousands of votes here, and a lot of people requested mail-in ballots here on the island. There's 4 or 5 ridings that have done really well. They're in the top 5, or top 10 across Canada. So we will see thousands and thousands of votes, but that's part of what we're factoring in tonight in the way that the ridings are being calculated, and those will be considered. They don't, like, it looks like, say, for example, there's 5,000 mail-in ballots in a riding. They don't all go to one candidate. They tend to break along the same lines. They might go a little bit more New Democrat and Liberal, but they're not necessarily, unless it's a really close race, something that could prevent you from calling a riding.
We can tell you that in the riding of Esquimalt Saanich Sooke, Randall Garrison has held on to his seat. We'll pull up the board right now. You see him way out in front. Only 45 polls reporting, but Randall Garrison will hold on in the riding of Esquimalt Saanich Sooke, and I believe we have one more call to make, Stacey.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at Alistair McGregor, who has held on to his seat in Cowichan and Malahat Langford. Again, a very comfortable lead over his second place Conservative competitor, Alana DeLong there. 45% of the popular vote for Alistair McGregor.
Okay, we're going to head back up to Nanaimo Ladysmith now, I believe. Sky Ryan is at Paul Manley's headquarters. You heard from Elizabeth May, the former leader, talking about keeping an eye on that riding. Fingers crossed. She had her fingers crossed for Manley that he could hold on. As of last check, though, he was in third. Let's take a look now. And Sky, bring us up to speed. How are things going where you are?
Well, looking at those numbers, it would appear that he's in third place with just a few hundred votes separating him from the nearest party, which is, it looks like the Ndp in first, and then Conservatives, then Green. But keep in mind, the campaign manager for Paul Manley just came on and told me that there is about 8,000 to 9,000 special ballots in this riding, one of the biggest requests for special ballots across Canada. And they're pretty confident that their vote is in those special ballots. So they're unfortunately not going to find out very soon, though. Friday is when these votes are going to be counted in this riding. So it could be a very tense night as we watch those numbers come in. But so far, the momentum is going with the Ndp and the Conservatives. But Manley's camp isn't, throwing in the towel. They're saying we're pretty comfortable with the vote that's going to be counted on Friday.
Yeah, Nanaimo Ladysmith, thank you, Sky. One of 3 ridings that we were keeping a close watch on, and it looks like if we look at all 7 ridings on the island right now, that seems to be the closest one. I do believe we have another decision that we can tell you about, and that is in Courtenay Alberni.
Yes, it looks like Gord Johns, who's been MP there since 2015, has secured his seat with 43% of the vote. That comes over Mary Lee, who's a former major in the Canadian Armed Forces. She's a newcomer this election. Brian Horner finished with 33% of the vote in 2019 for the Conservatives. But Gord Johns, the third NDP incumbent to hold on to their seat this time around.
Let's bring Katie and Mo back in, because I asked that question to Rob to explain the results we're seeing tonight. The fact that this was supposed to be a close race, and it doesn't look very close. And we couldn't ask Katie. We got sidetracked onto something else. But Katie, now it's your time to give us your response here. How do you explain this? The Conservatives right now sitting with 123 seats, 2 better than 2 years ago. Explain it to us.
Well, first I want to kind of nerd out and talk about poll methodology. It really,
okay.
It's really an art. It's an art and a science, and there are some people who are exceptionally good at it, and there are some people who just basically pay to play and like throw out shock value polls just to get more money. It very much depends on what kind of methodology you're using. Are you using IVR? Are you using online, which like has a tendency to swing left? Are you actually talking to people? What is your sample size? And are you able to actually explain it in a way that people who don't have advanced degrees in mathematics can understand? So I love talking about polling. It's not something that I'm super adept at, but I am so fortunate to have extraordinarily talented folks across the political spectrum and across the country to regularly explain it to me.
I was trying to keep up with all of that. I think I got it. I do enjoy it when you nerd out for us. I think that's the second nerd out we've had.
All right, Mo, throw it to you. Now, we talk about seat count, and that goes against popular vote, though, doesn't it? I mean, in the last election in 2019, the Conservative actually had 1% more in popular vote, but here we look at the seat count, and that's all that really matters. A similar thing happening today?
I mean, we'll see. It looks like the Conservatives, as of now, have a higher vote share. We'll see how this pans out. I am curious about voter turnout. You know, there were a lot of assumptions and projections that we would have low voter turnout in this election, but we saw that the advance polling was at a record, around 5.8 million. Obviously, special ballot kits were given out and returned at a record rate because of COVID. I'd be curious to see if we match numbers from 2019, if we're higher, if we're lower. In reality, though, I mean, it seems like people didn't change their minds from 2019, and however they felt in 2019, the pandemic and the election hasn't really swayed voters. So it'll be more post-analysis once we see the actual numbers.
Mo, we've got a lot of Lower Mainland viewers tuning in tonight, and you guys are coming to us from downtown Vancouver. You've kept your eye on some key ridings in the Lower Mainland over the last few weeks. We haven't shown any Lower Mainland results, but we will get them up. But can you walk us through any results? We'll put them up now. We've got Pitt Meadows and Maple Ridge coming up here. It looks like the Conservative there, Mark Dalton, is out in front. But any ridings that are surprising you out of the Lower Mainland?
Oh, I mean, right now I'm looking at Burnaby North Seymour, and it looks like Terry Beach is doing extremely well. I mean, in the previous two elections that he ran, he would get a popular vote around 35, 36%. He's currently polling, as you can see there, at 40%. Very high. I'm very surprised. I thought Jim Hansen was a really good contender. He is a district councillor on the North Vancouver side. I thought he had a lot of support from the Burnaby side. But Terry Beach, a very skilled retail politician, I think has surprised everyone. And I know that this was a top 3 riding for the federal NDP in BC. They really thought they could flip this one. So seeing this margin so far is very surprising.
And just as you were talking there, the check mark popped up, and it looks like Terry Beach has been re-elected in Burnaby North Seymour. So breaking news as Mo was talking about Terry Beach there.
All right, Katie, how about you? What are you keeping your eye on in the Lower Mainland?
Yeah, for me, it's Conservative targets. So they've got 17 seats. They've got their eye on about 6 more. So for me, I'm really invested personally in Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, because my friend Katerina is the candidate there. I think it'll also be curious to see what transpires in Vancouver Granville, in Fleetwood Port Kells. Dave Hare, a former BC Liberal MLA, is carrying the Conservative flag in that riding, as well as in the South Okanagan and Vancouver, West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast. So those are really the spots that I'm looking at. Congratulations so far to Mark Dalton and Pitt Meadows. That was one of the ridings that I had pegged to watch as part of our analysis over the past month, and so far it's working out as I had predicted. So I've predicted one thing right today. It's a success.
Speaking of predictions, Mo, I think it was 3 weeks ago in Vancouver Granville. Who did you say would take Vancouver Granville?
Anjali Appadore, it is a tight race. Last time I checked, she was up by a couple hundred votes, but it keeps going back and forth between her and Talib Noor Mohammed. This is a really interesting riding. Of course, this was Jody Wilson-Raybell's riding. She's the only MP to sit in this riding. Is it going to be a cursed riding for the Liberals? I mean, Talib Noor Mohammed had a lot of issues with credibility, particularly on the housing file. This is one to watch. I don't know if we're actually going to get the full results today, but this is one that I guaranteed, and I bet Rob Nanaimo bars on this riding. So I'll be delivering that plate next week, I think.
Oh, I thought that was going to happen tonight. We have to wait a week. Okay. All right. I'll just have my energy bar, my granola bar then. Let's talk about the island. Thank you, Katie and Mo. You can stay with us here. But Rob, let's talk about Alberni, or Courtney Alberni. You wanted to weigh in on that decision there.
Yeah, I just wonder if we can bring the numbers up again, because I want to take a look at them compared to the last time. So you see Gord John's at 45%. It's a little bit better than he was last time. The Conservatives at 31%, which is slightly lower than they were, just a couple points. And again, this is not all polls, but the Greens have collapsed from 13% last election to down to 5 to 6% this election. You see those votes going Liberal. The Liberals have come up from 11 to 13. But then there's the PPC at 6%. There was no riding on the island in the last election that had a PPC candidate even close to that. The maximum they ever got was almost close to 2%. So I don't know what to make of this, and we will compare it in other ridings as we go along. But a tripling of the PPC vote, potentially 1,200 votes there. If this was a riding in which it was close for the Conservatives, those could be spoiler votes. But they are also an indication here on the island, as much as we like to view Maxime Bernier and the PPC as kind of this Eastern thing that, it's happening out there. We would never do that. That's triple. That's quite large, actually, when you think about it. And we'll keep an eye on the PPC tonight.
Yeah, so interesting. That's a very interesting riding because, of course, that's where Qualicum Beach is. That's where Parksville is, the oldest median age in Canada there, as well as Tofino and, Port Alberni. So it's a little bit of everything in that riding. So it's really interesting the way those votes have played out there. And again, interesting with Tofino, Ucluelet, Pacific Rim that the Green Party has collapsed in such a dramatic way.
Let's see how our leaders have fared in this election. We're going to start with Papineau and Justin Trudeau with nearly half of the vote there. He has been re-elected. The NDP coming in second in Papineau. We're going to go through these. O'Toole also holding on to his seat in Durham. Again, nearly half of the vote in his riding.
And here we have Jagmeet Singh in Burnaby South. It looks like he's in a bit tighter a race there. He's at 37% ahead by 5% of his Liberal counterpart, Bree Huang Sammy. Just about 500 votes separating 400 votes. My math is awesome, as usual. A few hundred votes separating the
Don't
the
look
top
my way.
two there.
Yeah, I can't help you out.
But Jagmeet Singh in the lead right now with 65 polls reporting there.
I do think this would be in Toronto Centre. So Annamie Paul well behind right now. It looks like Marcy Ian will hold on in Toronto Centre, the former broadcaster there. I think this is a good moment to bring back Mo and Katie and talk about the future of some of these leaders. And maybe let's start with Erin O'Toole, Katie. What does the future look like after tonight for the Conservative leader?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of lessons to be learned tonight, that's for sure. And I can say that for the Conservatives, they win when they are united. There is nothing more important than unity in the Conservative movement. Erin O'Toole and his team, they took a gamble this election. And I think they surprised a lot of people with what I've deemed an aggressively moderate agenda. For a lot of people, this kind of push for the center, especially here in British Columbia, it would seem intuitive. As a large brokerage party, of course they're going to try and appeal to as many folks as possible, and often that does gravitate towards the center. But particularly with a big tent party, everyone needs to feel like they're welcome. Everyone needs to feel like they have something for them. And I've said this before, I think that if Erin O'Toole had more time, if he had kind of brought folks along before the writ dropped, I think that folks would feel like they didn't have to park their votes with another choice, namely the PPC. So it remains to be seen. I personally, I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned for BC Liberal candidates here in British Columbia. I like that, compassionate Conservative tone for our provincial party, but in terms of Erin O'Toole's future, it remains to be seen. Obviously, the Conservative membership will need to decide if they approve of his tone, approach, and message. And ultimately, it's also going to, I want to see how many seats the Conservatives end up with. They've already held the government to a minority, but I think it's going to be contingent upon them perhaps securing the popular vote and maybe picking up a few more seats than they had last time.
Okay, Mo, what do you think about Justin Trudeau's future here? I mean, we are at the same place we were, when this election was called just over 30 days ago, and that does not bode well for his future.
No, I don't think so. But before I get to Justin Trudeau, I do want to talk about something that Katie just mentioned. I don't think Katie and the Conservatives can have it both ways. I mean, on one hand, they're saying that the PPC is this extremist party and they're so far out to the right. And then on the other hand, they're complaining about vote splitting. I mean, you're categorizing them as a completely different party and then saying that they're taking votes from you. It doesn't make any sense, and I don't buy it. And I think Erin O'Toole is a better leader than Andrew Scheer, absolutely, but this vote splitting idea, as much as I love Katie, I don't buy it. When it comes to Justin Trudeau, this was a screw up for sure. I mean, I called it his own personal milk crate challenge. I don't think it was as disastrous as a fall as completely losing this election was, but I don't think he comes out of this unscathed. I think the party looks at him and wonders, is this the guy that can take them into the next election? And I'm sure there are knives out. I'm sure there are other contenders in waiting to take his role. The fact that he didn't gain any seats after what seemed like a pretty safe bet puts him in a lot of trouble. Absolutely.
Katie, I know you want to respond to Mo, and we've got all the time in the world, so have at it.
Right, so my rebuttal there would be, and I think people have a tendency to look at this as black and white. Like, PPC voters, as we've seen and as we've discussed, are essentially not a monolith. It's not just a number of lunatic, fringe, anti-vaxxers. These are people who are disaffected. They're disaffected with the path of the government. They're disaffected with COVID. They're perhaps uncomfortable with some of Mr. O'Toole's more progressive planks on the carbon tax, the switch on gun policy midway through the campaign. It's not just an either-or situation, and I think it's reductionist to suggest that the Conservatives are trying to have it both ways, when really it's just about appealing to different factions within a big tent brokerage party, and you see that with Liberals as well.
I don't know how you can call it reductionist when the PPC platform is so nuanced. I mean, this is a party that is talking about locking up Dr. Bonnie Henry. They are extremist, and this idea that the Conservatives are trying to bring in people who are appealed to that kind of mentality, I don't know. I don't buy it.
Rob?
Sometimes I think that we assume that people are really sophisticated. I think that we assume that people are as entrenched and interested in politics as we all are. And I have to tell you, like, normal people are absolutely not. They're just going on with their lives. I have met a number of people. They're typically young and often in the fitness industry who are attracted to the PPC, not because they are inherently racist and xenophobic and because they have been following Max Bernier's every move. It's because they are angry, they are perhaps rebelling against authority, and they are attracted to one single message of hope and freedom. They're not paying attention to every single thing that Max Bernier says. So I am not justifying the leadership of this party or what they stand for, but I am saying that I can understand someone who is not politically engaged, who hears one thing that appeals to them and votes for them on Election Day because they're not political nerds like the rest of us.
All right, I'm going to step in before Mo responds. Stacey, should we just go and we can just let them?
We'll just
No, this is why we wanted you guys here. This is great insight, and we love the back and forth. Here's what we'll do. We are going to go to some of our reporters in the field. Rob, I was just going to give you 30 seconds to kind of be middleman and respond to what you heard from your fellow panelists.
I think they make good points. I mean, the Conservatives have a choice to make about whether they want to be a progressive conservative movement. If that's where they want to go, they're going to have another kind of identity crisis, very similar to the BC Liberals here provincially. How do you create a tent? Who do you want in it? Who's acceptable to be in it, and what do people want to see? And when you try to appeal to urban voters in particular, you try to moderate your party a bit to win Metro Vancouver ridings and other ridings like that, as you see that the BC NDP have done. Go to the centre. But I'm not sure where the Liberals or the Conservatives are going to go now, and we'll watch to see if it's either under this leader or somebody new.
All right, thanks very much, Rob. Now, we have told you that 3 NDP incumbents have secured their seats. Gord Johns in Courtenay Alberni, Randall Garrison in Esquimalt Saanich Sooke, and Alistair McGregor in Cowichan Malahat Langford. The results in the Victoria riding is still to be determined, but we're going to check in with Mary Griffin now, who's standing by at Laurel Collins' office. Mary.
Well, Stacey, you know, if there's any indication of how politician is feeling and their staff. I knocked on the door just a couple of minutes ago at Laurel Collins' campaign office. You know, I've been going in and out all evening and chatting with people in there, chatting with the campaign manager. It was definitely a no-go zone the last time because she is in first place now with 47 at the 234 polls reporting, and it looks like she's in a solid lead. But, you know, the Liberals came in third in 2019, and Nikki MacDonald is still in a firm second place after being first in the first couple of polls reporting tonight. So, you know, keeping us at bay outside while waiting to figure out when and if the call is going to be made here in Victoria. I do remember in 2019 it went on for some time before Laurel Collins showed up. So as soon as we know, you'll know.
Right.
Sounds good, Mary. And I think perhaps some surprising numbers for the Conservatives' Hannah Hodson there. She's a newcomer to, she's not even living in Victoria, actually. She lives in Ottawa. She's the parliamentary assistant to MP Dan Albus there in Ottawa, and she's sitting there with 16% of the vote, the first transgender woman to be a candidate here for the Conservative Party. So a good showing for her.
All right, let's stick with the Conservatives and head back out to the peninsula. Andy Neal is standing by with David Bush's campaign. They are out at Seasidery tonight. Andy, what's the latest where you are?
Well, Joe, one thing we've been following in the Saanich Gulf Islands is just how much more spread out the voting is this time around than it was 2 years ago. Now, certainly Elizabeth May comfortably in front for the Green Party in this riding right now, but at 40%. Remember, the 3 previous elections that she won, she was around the 50% mark at 46.3 in 2011, 54.3 in 2015, and then 48.8 in 2019. David Bush was about 20% in second place in 2019. He's gone below the 20% mark right now. The person who's really made inroads in this riding is Sabina Singh of the NDP, about 12.5% of the vote in 2019. Now she's around the 20% mark, hanging right there with David Bush, and Sherry Moore-Arbor, the new candidate for the Liberal Party, at 17%. That's more than what Ryan Windsor, the candidate for the Liberals in 2019, had as well. And also the People's Party of Canada, David Alderman at 4%. That's more than double what Ron Broda had in 2019. So the votes are certainly much more spread around in the Saanich Gulf Islands this time around than they were 2 years ago. But again, as I say, Elizabeth May still comfortably in front at 40% of the vote so far.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Just looking at some of the island ridings we have right now. Again, Stacey just said a few minutes ago, re-elected in Courtenay Alberni is Gord Johns. Randall Garrison has been re-elected in Esquimalt Saanich Sooke, and Alistair McGregor in Cowichan Malahat Langford. I just caught it out of the corner of my eye in Nanaimo. It looks like Tamara Cronus, the Conservative candidate in Nanaimo Ladysmith, is out in front right now. So this is one, let's pull it up right now. Look how close this is. And it just switched. Lisa Marie Barron pulled ahead in front of Tamara Cronus. Paul Manley, you see him there in third. Rob, let's get your reaction to this. We had a chance to sit down with all these candidates, and they all impressed us. I mean, this is a really tight race, and one that we weren't just keeping an eye on here on the island, but right across the country. A lot of people were focused in to see how this would play out.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, Tamara Cronus took a lot of flack for not even living in this riding, for being in the process of moving from Toronto, where she's been active in Conservative politics there for Doug Ford and for the Toronto Mayor John Tory. It's kind of a reminder again of the strong Conservative base that exists in ridings like this that do well for candidates that don't even have a high local profile, that have to earn that during an election because they're not a name like Paul Manley that's been on the ballot a couple times, or even Michelle Corfield or Lisa Marie Barron. So this is a riding I think we're going to continue to watch, and keep in mind that there's more than 6,500 mail-in ballots to be counted here, the ones that are going to be counted tomorrow, the ones that were mailed in the riding and need to be counted in the 24-hour kind of delay period. So that changes things a little bit, and that means if we are in this three-way kind of tie, this two-way tie, or wherever we end up, it might not be a riding that's very easy to call tonight.
You know, funny enough, it was difficult to get local election promises out of these candidates, but the one person that did give us something was Tamara Cronus, who said, do you remember what she said, Rob?
She's talking about the ferry, wasn't
The
she?
foot passenger ferry, which
Yep.
was just announced 3 days prior. And I don't know if she had anything to do with that,
Well,
but
Aaron O'Toole came into the riding and promised to support that as well.
Right,
so,
yeah.
you know, all politics are local. That was a good move for the Conservatives.
But it is funny when we talk about promises and what the local candidates can deliver on. Very difficult to get actual things locally. I mean, how many times have we talked to these candidates and they went back to the party, you know, the party platform, and we're gonna plan this on housing, but very little specifics on local action. You know, we talked about in the riding of Esquimalt Saanich Souk, that foot passenger ferry. You know, is that a good idea? Can we get that going? We talk about the ENN line and the Malahad, and just very difficult to get any concrete action in terms of promises.
Yeah, and it has been a common refrain when the island elects new Democrat MPs in opposition. What have you brought to the riding? Where is your interchange? Where is your Gary Lunn Memorial kind of 7 roundabout, Middle Saanich, Pat Bay Highway?
Hold on, you don't like the roundabout at the airport?
It's fine, it's fine. But
just took you 5 years to figure it out.
It takes me a while. But there's an example of Gary Lunn, who was a cabinet minister in a Conservative government, delivering on a giant roundabout. And people often point to new Democrat incumbents and say, well, what have you done in opposition?
Right.
And they have to come up and kind of point to different projects in the riding. So.
Yeah, Rob, I'm going to interrupt you now. We are going to go to Ndp Paul, who is speaking now from her Toronto riding. Let's see if we can take Ndp Paul, leader of the Green Party.
So thank you so much to all of our volunteers all across the country. Please know that whatever size our contingent of Greens in Ottawa, it's because of you and the work that you did, and I thank you sincerely. Nous sommes un petit parti dans un système qui est créé pour des grands partis, qui est créé pour les partis traditionnels. Alors, nous sommes toujours très reconnaissants de nos bénévoles pour leurs efforts, pour leurs sacrifices, pour leur dédication, parce que c'est grâce à eux qu'un petit parti comme le nôtre a réussi. C'est grâce à eux que je crois qu'on va envoyer encore 3 députés pour nous représenter dans la prochaine session de Parlement, et je le remercie.
Oh, wait.
And I want to, I just spoke with Marcy Ian before coming down here. I wanted to sincerely congratulate her. I hope that, and I'm sure that the people of Toronto Centre will make sure that, that she provides them with good representation. Congratulated her on her race here in Toronto Centre. Clearly, I am, well, not clearly, but I will tell you that certainly I am disappointed. It is hard to lose. No one likes to lose. But I'm so proud of the effort, the creativity, the innovation that our team brought to this race. We promised to offer real representation. We promised to offer a real choice to the people of Toronto Centre, who have so much need, so much work that needs to get done. And you did that, and I thank you for that. I have some of my family here and some of my family in the audience, and I want to thank them as well. This is something where we're all in this together. You know, they lived every second and breathed every second with me. And I've said this many times. I mean, I've been campaigning in one way or another for the Green Party for the last almost 2.5 years now. And so this has been a very long journey for our entire family. And of course, you know, I love you, Mark, Malachi, my son Jonas, who's not here, my mother-in-law, my nephew, my sister-in-law, all of my family that is here. Et en plus, la famille qu'on a créée pendant cette élection et pendant les dernières années. There are so many members of my family that, you know, they're not...
You've been listening to Green Party leader Ndp Paul addressing her supporters from her riding in Toronto Centre, which she did not win. She will not
No.
win her seat.
Marcy Ian holds on to that seat, and I think the big question now for the party is what does the future hold for Annamie Paul? Does she stay on as the leader? Do they go another direction? Let's bring in April Lawrence. She is covering the Greens here on the South Island at the headquarters at Blanchard and Hillside, so not far from our studios here. April, what's the discussion like? I mean, is it too early to even talk about the future of Annamie Paul, or has that conversation started?
No conversation has started right now, Joe. It is very silent in here while people are listening to the rest of Annamie Paul's speech. I am here with Harley Gordon. He was the Green candidate in Esquimalt Saanich Souk. A concession speech from your leader, a tough night in your riding as well. Randall Garrison re-elected in that riding. How are you feeling tonight?
You know, I'm feeling pretty good. This is my first go at running in the federal election. It's been a really learning experience, and we still have a lot of the votes. We've got double digits percentages, over 10%. This is good. That's more Facebook friends than I have. So,
gotta love the positive attitude. You mentioned this was your first foray into politics. What made you want to do this? I saw part of your background. You're a chemist.
Yeah.
What made you want to do this? What made you want to do it for the Greens, and what were you ultimately hoping for?
Ultimately, well, okay, for my first foray into politics, I had actually volunteered on Mike Schreiner's campaign in Ontario and Guelph, and he is a Green MPP for the provincial legislature there in Ontario, and that was my first really involvement with the Green Party. Since then, I've been a party member, federally and provincially, and it's something that I'm quite passionate about because I still believe they're the only party that stand to take the bold action necessary to deal with the climate crisis. So I'm running ultimately for values, for change, and for the belief that together really the Green Party has a place in building a better future.
Where does the party go from here? Where would you like to see it go moving forward, as far as leadership, as far as the party direction goes, and will you stick with it?
So the party's grassroots, it's member driven. We're going to have a lot of votes. We're going to have an AGM. I think it's scheduled for November, and there will be a lot of decisions made by the membership for where this party goes, and I'm happy to see it. And you know what? We sort of received some news that Kitchener Centre looks like it's turning green. This is a big moment for the Green Party. This shows that the Green Party has a place in the Canadian political landscape, right? We just won a seat in Ontario.
Obviously a big win, so some tough losses, but you're choosing to go with the wins, choosing to go with the party.
Yeah, this whole campaign, all I've been saying to everyone is that you can't run for office unless you're an optimist. You got to believe in something's better.
That's great. And as far as the party goes and the fight against climate change, did you like what you saw this election as far as getting all the parties finally talking about it and seeing it take center stage?
I did. That's something that the Green Party has been really good at, is we put forth these bold policies, and then 5 years down the road, some of the other parties start to pick them up. The Ndp are running on our past climate action platform, but we're still here pushing the boundaries, and that's really important for Canada and for our future.
What do you want to take away from what we saw here today?
No one wanted this election. It's pretty obvious with the results that we're going to end up in the same situation we were before. It was not a good use of taxpayer money, and it was rather inappropriate for the Liberals to call. But every major party ran with a climate change platform. They ran with something to deal with the climate crisis, and I take that as a positive.
Great. Harley, thank you so much. Thank you for talking with us. So as you heard, taking the positives away, the Kitchener Centre seat, Elizabeth May taking her seat along with a few losses for the Green Party tonight. Back to you guys.
Thank you, April. I guess the silver lining there for Harley is more votes in Facebook friends. That's a positive, sure. But let's talk about Esquimalt. Thank you. Thank you, April. Let's talk about Esquimalt Saanich Souk. I mean, if you look at the Green vote last election, 2019, walked away with just under 27% of the vote, and look at it now, 10%. Rob, that is a massive drop.
Yeah, that's the collapse of the Greens there, and you see that vote instead going to the NDP, mainly it's brought up Randall Garrison from 34 to 42%, and the Greens have just sort of collapsed in like the souffle. And then some of the votes actually have gone to the Liberals as well. Again, you see the PPC there, 5%. The last PPC candidate was at 1.6%. So that's that's a big trend upward for the PPC as well. But again, what we're seeing, and Harley Gordon, articulate, young, bright, engaging young guy for the Greens, not a bad candidate, as well as Nick Loughton in Victoria, but we are seeing their votes collapse. And I think the question is going to be, how do the Greens reclaim that, if in fact they're going to do that, and what kind of platform, leader, or person do they need? Because it doesn't seem to have registered with voters this time.
I will say, while we're talking about Esquimalt Saanich Sooke, that the one takeaway when we talked to Randall Garrison about that passenger ferry from Royal Bay into downtown Victoria, he did say he was totally on board. He also said that he had been in talks to have a stop at CFB Esquimalt, so you'd have a ferry that would stop from your neck of the woods out on Royal Bay and the Chosen, stop at the base and then downtown. Thinks it's viable, thinks it will work. We just have to get over this study. Another study, and then maybe we'll get this thing done. But
another question about the Green Party candidates. I mean, quite a number of them are young, they are well-spoken, they're bright, as you say, but just their youth and a lack of recognition among the voters, Rob, makes me wonder if the Green Party had a bit of trouble recruiting. They only had candidates in 2/3 of the ridings across Canada this time. The chaos within the party, did that make it tough for the party to recruit candidates this time around?
I think it did in a little bit. You saw a generational change with it. The Greens, remember that in Esquimalt Saanich Sooke, the previous Green candidate was David Murner, who was actually previous to that the Liberal candidate. And so I think he brought a lot of votes with him there. And then in Victoria, we've seen higher profile Green candidates in the past than we have necessarily with Nick Loughton. So maybe a little bit, maybe we're just seeing a change in the Greens in the direction where they want to go and the people that they're fielding. But I don't think they can look at the results today in some of these ridings, even if they win Kitchener, and say that's good for the party. There's going to need to be a refresh and a rethink. They want to reclaim the votes that they've lost.
Let's bring Mo and Katie back in here. Let's stay on this conversation about the leaders and where the parties go from here. Mo, for the last 5 weeks, you've been covering the NDP and bringing us up to speed on the party and the candidates. How do you think they've done tonight, and what does the future look like? Is this a win, or is this cause for change?
I'm looking at the numbers right now, and I think they are disappointing. It's not a loss. It looks like they will gain a few seats. But again, going back to Burnaby North Seymour, which I think was a big target for them, to lose that so handedly, that's a little concerning. You look at even Burnaby South, it's I think Jagmeet Singh is going to take it, but it's within 5 or 6 percentage points. The numbers just aren't there, and I think there was a lot of enthusiasm. I went to a Jagmeet Singh rally, and there was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of energy. We're just not seeing that translate, and even in the popular vote, they're not really crossing that 20% margin, at least the last time that the 20% popular vote, at least the last time that I checked. So I don't know, it's a little disappointing. I will say Port Moody Coquitlam still in play. It looks like Benita Zarello is leading there. Vancouver Granville, where I have that Nanaimo Bars bet, keeps going back and forth as well, so that would be a huge win for them. But nationally, when you look at the seat count and you look at the popular vote, it's not there. And I know there hasn't been a lot of talk about switching out Jagmeet Singh for a new leader, but they've tried this for 2 election cycles. I like some of the stuff that they've done. I think it's really innovative and really interesting, but it clearly hasn't translated to a substantial jump in the polls, so might be time to switch them out.
Just as you were talking, looks like Rachel Blaney has held on to her seat in the riding of North Island Powell River. So as it stands right now, we know the outcome in 4 of our 7 island ridings. We're still waiting for, there it is right there, North Island Powell River. We're still waiting for the call in Victoria, Saanich, Gulf Islands. I mean, it looks like it's a lock for Elizabeth May there. And Nanaimo Ladysmith. The last time I saw the results pop up, it looked like Tamara Cronus had a 170 vote lead over Lisa Marie Behrens, and Paul Manley was in 3rd place there. There it is. So now I'm going to ask you to do math, Stacey, and you can tell me to bugger off. But yeah, I mean, Tamara Cronus still out in front.
And keep in mind, though, remember those mail-in ballots, and those mail-in ballots are not going to be counted until tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, perhaps. So we may not know who's won this riding for a number of days now. And Rob, you wanted to weigh in on this.
Well, just that it looks like, I get to say these fancy things now, Saanich Gulf Islands is declared. It appears that we do have Elizabeth May.
All right.
That's fun. I enjoyed doing that.
I was going to say, how did that feel for you?
Do I need more gravitas? I need to speak from the diaphragm. Saanich Gulf Islands
there it is, and they put the board up for you.
Elizabeth May. That's obviously good news for her. That is not quite the 50% margin, 50% popular vote we saw in the last election, but it's a healthy victory for Elizabeth May, entering her second decade as the MP for this riding. She transcends the internal fighting with the Greens, and I guess it's no surprise that she continues to hold this seat seemingly for as long as she wants it, and at least for another term.
And I think some people look at this and they go, well, why doesn't she just become the leader again? Like, why doesn't she take the party back?
She may be the leader again.
Well,
it depends on how the Green Party internally. I think the Greens wanted to go with a Toronto-centered urban leader, grow the party, expand it beyond Elizabeth May. With that off the table now, depends on how Kitchener goes. She could just be the de facto leader again. She could be the only MP or a caucus of two. We'll have to see how things go.
All right, we are approaching 9:30 our time here. We're told that Justin Trudeau around 9:30 will speak. There is a look at the podium. Sometime within the next 10 minutes, we are expecting Justin Trudeau to take the mic and I guess thank voters for this gamble that has paid off. He will continue to be the Prime Minister. It's a minority government. Right now, they're currently sitting at 157 seats, which is exactly what they walked away with in 2019. But they entered this campaign down 2, and there you see the national seat count. And I think a lot of people will be looking at the NDP here and at the Greens. 27 seats. I mean, it's an increase from last election, but as Mo said, not really what they were after. They were expecting to do a bit better than that.
Let's bring Katie and Mo back in. And Katie, I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on the campaign trail, and as presented by our leaders. Was there anything that stood out to you, positive or negative, about the campaign for our leaders?
Well, for me, the first 2 weeks of the campaign were pretty spectacular because the Conservatives were in the lead. But yeah, I had a few best moments of the campaign. I thought Erin O'Toole's message to Canadians with regards to Afghanistan was really prime ministerial. I appreciated that message of leadership as Kabul was falling and the Afghanistan mission was unraveling. I have to say, I like the NDP's tactics. Like Jagmeet Singh, I do think he contributes a lot to political discourse. I commend him for wanting to get younger people involved. I like the use of TikTok. I liked when he did the Punjabi poutine. I like when he does the skateboarding and handstands. Now, that party needs to decide whether they want to be more of a movement and simply kind of say the right nice things, or do they want to be a more substantive, like Jack Layton style political party that truly seeks the office of Prime Minister? And then to give the Liberals a bone, like I thought Trudeau's statement to Rebel Media after the French debate was a really positive moment for them. It got overshadowed with the English debate the following day, but him taking a stance on behalf of Canada was that stood out to me as positive.
Katie, what about Erin O'Toole and his future? Are there any question marks there?
Well, naturally, like whenever you don't secure a victory for, like, and a real victory, like a majority government, of course there are going to be questions as to the future of your leadership. I look forward to hearing from Erin O'Toole later on. And as I said, I think it's going to come down to Conservatives deciding, like, is this campaign strategy to appeal to the center? Is it effective? Is it going to get us elected? Or do we need to try and broaden the tent in ensuring that all of the kind of competing factions in a big tent party feel like they belong? It's difficult because we are going to have another election in 2 years, right? We have a minority government. This is not stable. And so does it make sense to change leaders yet again and have a new voter proposition to Canadians? That remains, that will come down to grassroots Conservative membership for sure.
Thanks, Katie. We are watching Erin O'Toole as he takes the podium to address his supporters, his fans. There was his wife, Rebecca, who's been alongside him and several campaign stops along the way in these last 36 days. Aaron O'Toole winning his riding, of course, in Durham. So he's secure there as MP. He will be returning to Parliament Hill.
You know, when we're talking about Justin Trudeau speaking at 9:30, typically you have the loser take the microphone prior to the winner. So I figured that we would hear from Aaron O'Toole before we heard from Justin. Curious if Aaron reached out to Justin Trudeau, and if they've had a conversation. We might find out right now. Let's listen in and hear what Aaron O'Toole has to say.
Friends, thank you. Merci beaucoup, thank you. Well, it was after 1 in the morning when I first addressed the nation as leader of Canada's Conservatives, so it's fitting I address you late again. At the start of this pandemic, I called for a Team Canada approach to combat COVID-19. 18 months later, our nation needs that more than ever. Les Canadiens ont passé trop de nuits blanches à s'inquiéter pour la santé de leurs proches, les pertes d'emploi et l'avenir de leurs enfants. La pandémie a augmenté les petites différences entre nous. Elle a aussi aggravé la division chez les Canadiens. Malheureusement, cette élection n'a fait qu'empirer les choses. Mais je suis ici ce soir encore plus déterminé envers ce merveilleux pays. 5 weeks ago, Mr. Trudeau asked for a majority. He said the minority parliament was, quote, unworkable. But tonight, Canadians did not give Mr. Trudeau the majority mandate he wanted. In fact, Canadians sent him back with another minority at the cost of $600 million and deeper divisions in our great country. Just days ago, he said he would hold yet another election within 18 months if he didn't get his way. Quelques jours seulement, M. Trudeau disait qu'il allait déclencher une autre élection dans 18 mois s'il n'avait pas ce qu'il voulait. Mr. Trudeau was hoping for a quick power grab. Instead, he has thrust us into what he has promised will be 18 months of perpetual campaigning. Our country is facing the most serious economic challenge since the Great Depression. Even before the pandemic led to record debt and deficits, investment and jobs were leaving Canada. Les prix continuent d'augmenter de l'essence, de l'épicerie et des logements. L'inflation est à son plus haut niveau en 20 ans et elle continue de grimper tous les jours. Les familles ont de la difficulté à joindre les deux bouts. Mais pour relever ces défis énormes, on doit travailler ensemble. On doit continuer la lutte. For too long, we have been divided. For too long, we have seen politicians pit region against region, neighbor against neighbor. But when we are divided, Canadians get left behind. Mr. Trudeau thinks Canadians should endure 18 more months of divisive campaigning so he can try once again to get the election result he wants. We need to heal the divides in Canada, not risk worsening them for selfish gains. A few months ago, I told Conservatives that our party needed the courage to change because Canada has changed. Over the past 36 days, we have demonstrated to Canadians that we have set out on a path to engage more Canadians in our Conservative movement, one that addresses the challenges of today while advancing the dreams of tomorrow. Ours is a conservatism that dwells not in the past, but learns from it to secure the future. Qu'on offre un nouveau mouvement conservateur, un mouvement conservateur pour relever les défis d'aujourd'hui, un mouvement conservateur pour réaliser les rêves de demain et un mouvement conservateur qui ne regarde pas uniquement vers le passé, mais qui apprend et qui agit pour l'avenir. It is a conservatism that reveres strong communities and compassion for one another, for our environment, and for those in need at home and abroad. It is a conservatism that respects hard work and character, and the fact that millions have come to this great country for liberty and opportunity. It's a conservatism that believes reconciliation is more than a box to check. It is the very keystone of Canada reaching its potential, and it starts with clean drinking water as a basic human right still denied to Indigenous children born today. And above all else, it is a conservatism that believes Canada is the greatest country on earth and that our best days are on the horizon. A conservatism that builds Canada up. Let's build it up. In the months ahead, thank you, friends. In the months ahead, as Mr. Trudeau gears up for yet another election, we must continue this journey to welcoming more Canadians to take another look at our party. More people voted for Canada's Conservatives than any other party, and that's a strength to build on. Our support has grown. It's grown across the country, but clearly there is more work for us to do to earn the trust of Canadians. On est le parti fondateur de ce pays et le parti de son avenir. Le Parti conservateur va battre les libéraux, mais seulement s'il continue de grandir. We have shown ourselves to have the courage to be bold and to have the courage to change. We must hold fast to that courage. We must show Canadians that we will not waver in our commitment to grow. On doit continuer de gagner la confiance des Canadiens. On a travaillé fort, on a fait des progrès, mais le travail n'est pas terminé. As we prepare for the election Justin Trudeau wants in another 18 months, we will take stock of what worked and what didn't. And we will continue to put in the time showing more Canadians that they are welcome in the Conservative Party of Canada. Above all, we must continue to show Canadians that whether you're black, white, brown, or from any race or creed, whether you're LGBTQ or straight, whether you are an Indigenous Canadian or came to Canada 5 weeks ago or 5 generations ago, que le français soit votre première ou deuxième langue. Whether you're doing well or barely getting by, whether you worship on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, every day or not at all, you are an important part of Canada, and you have a place in the Conservative Party of Canada.
You've been listening to Conservative Party leader Erin O'Toole with a very passionate concession speech that didn't sound too much like a concession speech to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was passionate, but I'm not sure he really accepted defeat. We will get some reaction from the experts on what you just heard there. But we have Sky Ryan in Nanaimo Ladysmith standing by right now with the leader as it stands, Tamara Cronus, a Conservative candidate, only in the lead by a few hundred votes right now, if that. Sky, over to you.
Well, this is as tight a race as we've seen, certainly. Tamara Cronus, there doesn't appear to be a huge celebration underway here, but Tamara, you're feeling relieved, maybe happy.
I'm just going to wait till all the ballots are counted.
Did you expect the race to be this tight, and did you expect to be in the lead?
I've always been here to win this riding, and I'm delighted by the reception I've gotten at the doors. And if I'm honored to serve this riding, I intend to serve it well.
Now, Tamara's holding back on her enthusiasm. This is actually Tamara's first run in politics. 4 years ago, she moved here from Ontario, and she's a mother of two, a jeweler, a goldsmith. You seem to have your head about you that this is just going to be a long wait. She has the information that we provided earlier that there's going to be some significant numbers of mail-in ballots. What are you expecting?
I'm gonna wait like everybody else to find out who our MP is. And I'm hoping it's going to be me.
What are you looking to see from the polls tonight when we start to see Paul Manley 1,500 votes behind, and it is a horse race between you and Lisa Marie Barron? What is that telling you about voters tonight?
It hopefully tells me that when all the ballots are counted, the people of Nanaimo, Ladysmith will have put their confidence in me to represent them in Ottawa.
So at this point, obviously, there's some enthusiasm. It's subdued. I'll give you that. Tamara Cronus being in the lead on a night when we really thought this was going to be a three-horse race. She and the NDP candidate Lisa Marie Barron are taking the night. Again, we have to mention 8,000 to 9,000 mail-in ballots, special ballots to be counted. And unfortunately for all of us that are looking for a result tonight, it won't come. We're going to be seeing these results and these special ballots counted on Friday, Joe.
All right, thank you, Sky. It took me the latter part of that interview, but I figured it out. I think it's 77 votes. Is the math right on that?
Yes, and they've switched. So Lisa Marie Barron and the NDP actually switched, and she is now leading by, what did you say, 77? 70?
I don't want to say it because
it
changes so quickly on me, and then people say, oh, you can't count.
Less than 100. So, Rob Shaw, what are your thoughts on this Nanaimo Ladysmith race, and also on what you just heard from Aaron O'Toole?
Well, just first on the Nanaimo Ladysmith, you see Paul Manley at 25% of the vote. That's a 10-point drop from the last election. So you see the Green support kind of contracting here. It's going to the New Democrats. It's going to the Conservatives. The Greens took from all parties, but they're certainly not probably very happy with that number that they're seeing in turnout. Now, the Greens will say that there's more than 6,500 mail-in ballots to count, and that's going to be favorable to them potentially, but that is not great for the Greens. Also, I think interesting, 5 points in the popular vote for the People's Party. It's more than almost 2,500 votes that the Conservatives would love to have in this riding, especially when they're at 13,000 votes-ish. So if there wasn't a People's Party and those votes did go Conservative, we'd be in a bit of a different situation right now. Again, an example of how just even a small party can siphon away a little bit of support from the Conservatives.
Katie, let's get you and Mo back in here. Dissect for us what you just heard from Aaron O'Toole. I mean, you have close connections to this party. You know how to craft a concession speech. You know how to craft any speech. But what you just heard there, what was that? Because we were sitting in the studio here saying to one another that he's not really accepting defeat here. He's trying to play this off as a win, saying the Liberals always wanted a majority, and essentially we won tonight because they have a minority.
Yep. And he has to do that. He had to come in passionate, content with the way that everything rolled out, and sell this as a victory to the base, that he managed to hold Trudeau to a minority, that this may mean the end of Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Party. And he specifically alluded several times to an election 18 months from now. That is so it helps secure his job. He is putting forward the message that it would be ridiculous to try and change, when they've had this momentum, Trudeau might be gone, why change leaders now? That was deliberate. When he says broadening the appeal, that I believe is a reference to his progressive conservative agenda and the need to bring more people along to the conservative movement. If I would offer one piece of advice, and I've heard this a few times, when he's saying that conservatives need to, we can't dwell in the past and this isn't your father's party, that to me is an implicit shot against Stephen Harper. And permit me for a second, but Stephen Harper ran an incredibly successful, strong, stable, majority conservative government. He navigated this country through an economic recession. He stood up to Russian dictators. He cut the GST. Like, he is a legend in the Conservative Party, and I don't think continuously taking these little pot shots is going to leave people whose votes he is going to rely on, whose support that he's going to rely on. I don't think that he is going to achieve that objective if he takes these shots here and there. That is my one piece of advice to the O'Toole team.
All right, Mo, what's your take on O'Toole's speech?
Well, first of all, I mean, Stephen Harper might be a legend amongst the Conservative base, but his brand isn't exactly flying off the shelf in 2021. So I would push back a little bit on that. When it comes to Erin O'Toole's speech, it was incredible. It was really good. I mean, every prize fighter knows when you lose a scrap, you're selling the next one right away. It doesn't matter what happens. And that's kind of what he's doing. He's setting up the re-election. He's really appealing to Conservatives that he should still be the guy. It was a very impassioned speech, but it also, I mean, not to be too cynical, it was making the case for him to stay on. I really liked the part where he talked about the divisions in this country, because when you look at what's happening right now and you look at the results of this election, they look pretty similar to 2019. However, there are a lot of underlying tensions that didn't exist in 2019. And now we can talk about parties internally and where their focus is and what their leadership is like. But more than that, I think the big narrative out of this election, and we can't lose focus on it as much as we don't like to talk about it, as much as I just took lumps about it from Katie, is the PPC and this conspiratorial movement, this anti-science movement. I mean, they're storming hospitals and schools, and they're being completely disruptive in a global pandemic, and they're making things worse. I mean, we're seeing what's happening in Alberta with people being very upset about very necessary lockdowns. This is a major issue in Canada, and we've seen it in the United States. We saw the January 6th riots, insurrection, whatever you want to call it. This is not good. I mean, to put it simply, it's not good. Whoever is Prime Minister, it's obviously going to be Mr. Trudeau for now. This is something they have to reckon with and something they have to deal with. I don't know what the solution is, but I think this is a very serious issue, and we need leadership from the top to help heal these divides, to help bring some of these people, honestly, back into sanity, because the way that this loud minority of people are acting is not good for the country, and it's not good for anyone.
Rob, how much of that, though, is fueled by the pandemic? I mean, if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, if we weren't dealing with COVID passports and COVID recovery, do you think that we would see the aggression we're seeing right now? Like, I think we wouldn't.
Well, I think anti-authority, anti-government people always look for something to rally around. I don't know if they believe wholeheartedly in whatever the PPC believes in. They just believe in freedom, and they believe in fighting the government, and suddenly they found a home in that. So the PPC doesn't really exist. It's kind of like a vessel that captures a bunch of other people who are otherwise might have tin foil in their hair running around looking for a leader to get behind. On the O'Toole speech, I think it was the right move. It was his only move. Appear prime ministerial as much as you can. Try to tell people that there's another election coming. We got to be ready for it. We got to grow. He's doubling down on the progressive part of it. You are welcome in. We have to grow the party, not kind of change where we are. It really was his only move, but he doesn't decide his future. The caucus will decide his future, and people in the back rooms will decide his future. And so I think we'll have to wait and see in the days ahead how that plays out.
Was it just me, or was the last 45 seconds of that speech from O'Toole the most impassioned we've seen in the last 35 days?
100%.
Katie, do you agree?
It was pretty passionate, Joe.
But no, not pretty passionate. The most passionate. There's a difference.
I agree, but I think that and you saw this in the debate performance, right? Like O'Toole's brand throughout the campaign has really been more like cool, calm, collected, rather than fiery and passionate.
Okay. Well,
I think that's actually part of the problem.
Okay, sorry, Mo. Yeah, sorry, jump in here.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem with how they ran this campaign. They ran it really safe, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think there's this perceived notion that if you run a safe campaign, the risks are lowered, which isn't true. There's a lot of uncertainty. The risks still exist. And when you play a safe campaign and you're not swinging for the fences, you're never going to hit a home run. And that's why we're seeing results that are kind of meh, they're kind of the same. And I think if we saw more of that impassioned O'Toole, more of that person that's leading into those progressive conservative inclinations, It's endearing, it's captivating. I was impressed. I was never a big fan of O'Toole, but I really liked that speech. I think he's got to lean into that a lot more and not play it as safe as he did in this election cycle.
Should we bring up our island ridings and do a quick recap for people who may be joining us? I think it's a good point in the night to just go over. And look, we can tell you now, in the riding of Victoria, Laurel Collins has held on to that seat. So that means that we are only waiting for one island riding, and that's Nanaimo Ladysmith, and that is a nail-biter. But Laurel Collins, with just over 6,600 votes, I think that a lot of people, we've said this all night, thought this would be one of the closer ridings and that Nikki MacDonald would put up a bit of a fight. We heard from her campaign organizers earlier telling us, look, we got to wait till all the votes are counted. But at this point, it looks like this one's in the bag.
A very, very strong showing for Laurel Collins. She only got 33% of the popular vote last time around. That was only 3% more than the Green Party's Michelle Couey. So this time with 44% of the popular vote, that is a big surge for the incumbent Laurel Collins.
Here's Saanich Gulf Islands. No surprise here. Elizabeth May holds on to her seat. David Bush was in second place for a big portion of the night. Back in 2019, he had about 20% of the vote, 13,000 votes when it was all said and done. Only 145 polls reporting right now, and Sabina Singh is in second place. So a strong showing for Elizabeth May.
And for Sabina Singh as well. She was in fourth place in 2019, so she's moved up to second place with 21% of the popular vote there.
We should say, I mean, you know, strong showing, but a considerable drop-off, though, from where she was 2 years ago, taking about 50% of the vote. So she holds on to the seat as we continue to go through these island ridings.
Yeah, and here we are in Esquimalt, Saanich, and Souk. Randall Garrison with precisely double the number of the percentage of popular vote here compared to Colwood councillor Doug Kobayashi for the Liberals. Randall Garrison has been in that riding for 10 years to this point, so he has another go at it. 34% in 2019. He's up to 43% here.
Bit of a late push by Doug Kobayashi. He was in third for most of the night, and Lauren Frost has dropped behind him. So the Liberals in second in this riding, but Randall Garrison walking away with it. As we jump to probably Cowichan, Malahat, Langford, and then there you see Alistair McGregor walks away with this one. Alana DeLong, the Conservative, with 28% of the vote there. Back in 2019, she finished with 26%. So again, a bit of a strong showing by the Conservatives in this riding.
And this another example of the Green struggles here. Leah Versival finished in third spot in 2019. She was trumped for third spot this time quite handily by the Liberals' Blair Herbert.
Okay, and then we move to Nanaimo Ladysmith, and this is the one the entire island is keeping a very close eye on. It keeps going back and forth. Tamara Cronus was in the lead for some time. We heard from her. Didn't really want to give us much. She said she'll wait till all the votes have been counted. But Lisa Marie Barron out in front right now by a small margin. We will continue to follow this riding throughout the night until we say goodnight. But right now, just too close to call.
Yeah, there's 50 polls left to report here in Nanaimo Ladysmith, and we've talked about it before. But this could be a situation where those mail-in ballots really are important. And again, 6 of the top 10 ridings in the country in mail-in ballots come from Vancouver Island.
Okay, and then we go to Courtney Alberni. Gord Johns, this one was announced earlier tonight. Right out of the gates, Gord Johns took a lead and he held on to it. Gord Johns with 21,000 votes, almost 22,000, almost all the polls reporting there. Still a few to go. The Conservatives again in second place, and this is a trend we're starting to see through the north part of the island. The Conservatives, strong showing, second place, but just not enough to win back some of those seats from the NDP.
Yeah, that's right. And again, Gord Johns improving on his performance in 2019. He's going up to 44% of the popular vote, up from 41% in 2019. And finally, here we go, the North Island Powell River. Another NDP incumbent keeps her seat, this time Rachel Blaney, winning handily over the Conservatives, Shelley Downey, here in North Island. And there's about 54 polls left to report here.
All right. Mary Griffin has been keeping an eye on the Victoria riding. And, okay, we're just getting word that she is working on getting Laurel Collins for us, the winner of that riding. We don't have it yet, but we will hear from Laurel Collins shortly, and we will hear from Justin Trudeau shortly as well. Okay, looks like this is probably Trudeau's camp here. He's going to come out of those doors, I imagine, or around that curtain. Rob, you're awfully quiet over there. What are you doing over there?
Actually, I was going to talk about Victoria if we want to bring up that riding just as we're waiting.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of time here. So
Yeah.
what do you want to tell us about Victoria?
Well, just to mention here again, and you know, we're looking at these numbers, and they're not final, but this is what we would call the collapse of the Greens. And so there's a 17-point drop in the Green the support here. And the hope from the Liberals, again, was that those Greens went Liberal. They followed Andrew Weaver, who endorsed Nikki MacDonald. They would rally behind the climate agenda that she has and that the Liberals had. It didn't happen. Instead, they went to Laurel Collins, who's up 11 points. And so I think that is really the story of Victoria, and it's unfortunate for the Liberals who viewed this as their best shot at a seat on the island. They have been shut out of the island for many, many years now, and nothing I see in any of the results here tonight shows that they are on a path to win a riding in the island anytime soon. So there'll need to be a rethink from the Liberals if they want to contend in some of these seats, and a rethink from the Greens as well. And then again, PPC up from, they were at 1.3%, they're at 4% in this riding, a theme we see in the other ridings, that the People's Party is up as their share of the popular vote. Not necessarily votes per se, because we don't have all the polls in, but a percentage of the vote. They're certainly showing more support.
All right, and we understand that Mary Griffin does have Laurel Collins standing by, so let's head to downtown and check in with Mary Griffin. Mary.
Oh, hi. Thanks very much, Stacey. And I'm standing here with Laurel Collins. You've just been declared elected in the riding, Laurel. How was this campaign?
This was an incredible campaign. Our team, the support we had throughout Victoria. You know, I just want to say a huge thank you to the people of Victoria for placing their trust in me. And I am going to go back to Ottawa and keep fighting for this community, keep fighting for the issues that really matter here. Bold action on the housing crisis, real action on reconciliation, real action on the climate crisis, and making sure the wealthiest pay their fair share.
A little bit of a scare early on with Liberal candidate Nikki MacDonald taking the first lead. Were you concerned at all at that point?
You know, we waited to kind of tune into the results until probably about an hour into it. We were out door knocking all day and really pulling the vote, and our campaign team just did such an incredible job. I want to say a huge thank you to all of our volunteers, all of our organizers. Also, thank you to Nikki and Nick and Hannah. They ran incredible campaigns, and you know, democracy is stronger because people put their name on the ballot.
Now, a lot of people might not know this, but you're a new mom. I'm just wondering what it's been like campaigning with the young family.
Honestly, I wouldn't be here without the support of my incredible family. My partner, my mom, his parents really came together to support us and to help
Mary,
care for
we apologize.
our little baby Alora. She's 4
apologize
months
to
old.
you and Laurel Collins, but we have to jump in here. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is about to take the microphone. Let's listen in to what he has to say.
To all the volunteers, to all our candidates, and grand merci, thank you so much. I want to recognize the hard work of all the leaders and their teams. Thank you for playing your role and being a part of our democracy. I want to congratulate the Prime Minister on his re-election as Prime Minister of Canada. And I want to thank Canadians for voting. And I want to let Canadians know that you can count on New Democrats to continue fighting for you. As we've fought for you in the pandemic, when times were difficult, when people were struggling, when people were worried about their future, we were there for you. We fought to make sure people got more help. We fought to increase the CERB, we fought to increase the wage subsidy, we saved millions of jobs, and we helped millions of Canadians stay at home. We are going to continue fighting for you. Just the same way we fought for you in the pandemic, you can count on us to continue those fights. We're going to make sure that we fight hard to defend our environment, to make sure we're fighting the climate crisis like we really want to win. You can count on New Democrats to keep on fighting to make sure you can find a home that's in your budget for all those people struggling to find a home. We see you, we hear you, and we're going to fight to make sure that there is a home in your budget. To people out there that are struggling with health care, you can count on New Democrats to keep on fighting for you to make sure we get profit out of our long-term care system, to make sure our loved ones, our seniors, never again bear the brunt of any sort of pandemic or any sort of outbreak, that we care for our loved ones and our seniors and put them before profits by eliminating profits in long-term care. And we are going to continue to fight to make sure our healthcare system is there for you when you need it, there for you and your loved ones when you need it, by making sure we include medication coverage, pharmacare, that our teeth are covered through dental care, and making sure that our mental health is also covered and included into our healthcare system. Friends, I also want you to know that we are going to keep on fighting to make sure that the super wealthy pay their fair share, that billionaires pay their fair share, so the burden doesn't fall on you and your families. And I want you to know that we're going to continue to fight for justice for the first people of this land. Indigenous communities that continue to be denied basic human rights, clean drinking water, adequate housing. We are going to continue to fight for you. We've heard your stories. We see you. We are going to fight for you with everything we have. You can count on all of us, all New Democrats, to continue that fight. Pour les Québécois et Québécoises, peu importe le nombre de députés dans notre caucus, dans notre équipe, je veux vous assurer qu'on va continuer de se battre pour vous. Comme on a fait pendant la pandémie, on était là pour vous. On savait qu'on a eu des temps difficiles. C'était tellement difficile pour les gens. C'est pourquoi on s'est battu pour augmenter la PCU. Quelque chose qui a aidé des millions de personnes au Québec. On va continuer de vous aider comment on a augmenté la subvention salariale et en faisant ça, on a sauvé des millions d'emplois. Vous pouvez être sûr que notre équipe va continuer de se battre pour vous. Tous nos députés vont aller chercher des victoires, des gains pour aider les gens au Québec et à travers le pays. Vous pouvez compter sur nous pour s'assurer qu'on défend l'environnement, qu'on fait face à la crise climatique, qu'on règle la crise du logement, qu'on investit dans nos soins de santé. Vous pouvez être sûr qu'on serait là pour vous. Et vous pouvez être sûr que si on ose ensemble, on peut bâtir une meilleure société, et c'est exactement ce que les néo-démocrates vont faire. My friends, I want you to know that our fight will continue. We are never going to give up fighting for you and your families. As we have done in the pandemic, as we showed you in this campaign, we will continue to make sure you are first, your families are taken care of, that your needs are met. That's what New Democrats are all about. I want to leave you with something that my mom always taught me as I was a kid. She always said that we are all one. And it is so true. We are connected. When people around us are hurting, we're also hurting. But when we take care of one another, when we support one another, when we lift each other up, we all rise. That's what you can be sure of. New Democrats will fight to take care of all Canadians so that together we all rise. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Je suis tellement fier d'être ici. Merci. Merci.
Okay, that was NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. I don't think any surprises there. That is the same leader that we've received for the last 35 years. Telling all Canadians that the NDP will work for them. The same message we've heard for weeks. Let's bring Mo and Katie back in here, and Rob. Mo, it looks like we're in the same place we were 2 years ago. I mean, if you look at the seat count right now, the national seat count, it's pretty much the exact same result we had in 2019. Are we in the same place, or do you think that the environment's a bit different despite the numbers?
Yeah, in terms of net result, it looks like we're in the same place. I mean, I think the silver lining for the NDP might be that so far, at least as of now, they're the only party showing gains. I mean, it's only 3 seats, but you know, it has to be disappointing for Jagmeet Singh in terms of not even breaking 20% in terms of the popular vote so far. I think that was a speech from a leader that was very disappointed. But I think internally, when you look at all these major parties, they're all going to go back to the drawing board, and they're going to have to make a decision whether it's Trudeau or O'Toole or Singh or even Annamie Paul. Is this the leader to take them into the next election? And it might very well be because of the threat of an election in 18 months. But those conversations are going to be had because no one really seemed to move the dial. And, you know, momentum is everything. So if you're feeling that you're stalled and you're not making any progress, you have to at least have the conversation. And I think particularly for the NDP, this is a very disappointing result. I saw Jagmeet speak last night in Burnaby North Seymour. That was a very different Jagmeet Singh, even though he made and said a lot of the same things that he just did in this speech. A lot of disappointment. And so I think there is going to be a lot of thinking on that, on their side about whether their strategy has been working or maybe they should go, you know, in a different direction. I think with O'Toole, we've kind of discussed him already. And obviously with Trudeau, this is not a win. You know, this is a draw at best. It was an unnecessary, wasteful election, and I think the Liberals are going to have to think about how they move forward and if they move forward with him.
Rob, what does this mean for BC, for John Horgan, for the BC NDP?
Well, you know, here's the funny thing about the BC government. Despite it being a New Democrat premier, I think secretly John Horgan preferred Justin Trudeau to win. Because there are a lot of billions of dollars on the table here for $10 a day child care that the Trudeau government promised before the election. That's a big promise that John Horgan needs that money to deliver. Trudeau showed up and gave a bunch of money for SkyTrain to the middle of to Langley. So that's money that the Horgan government wants. I think if the Conservatives had won, there would have been questions about the carbon tax and their change to that when BC's been a leader with the carbon tax. So I think, you know, despite John Horgan saying he endorses the federal NDP, he is a member of the NDP, I think the reality was he wanted a Liberal win and not a Conservative win because he's much more in alignment with a Liberal government than he would be with a Conservative. To build on just what Mo was saying there and the Jagmeet Singh speech, I was struck by the fact he celebrated and congratulated Justin Trudeau on becoming re-elected as Prime Minister. That's not technically true. It will be Jagmeet Singh in Parliament who gives him the votes to become the Prime Minister and continue to govern. So I think the NDP are distancing themselves a little bit from that. They don't really have anywhere to go other than support him. But it is only with the NDP that this is possible for the Trudeau to continue to govern. Without that, we'd just be stuck and we'd be having another election or there'd be some other shenanigans going on with the Governor General and we'd all be consulting constitutional lawyers and we'd be nerding out on that. So I think in there is an acknowledgement the NDP have nowhere to go but to try and get a little bit of concessions from Trudeau and back his next throne speech and budget.
We're still waiting to hear from Trudeau. We expect that to happen shortly. So much for 9:30 or 35 minutes late. I imagine, though, his party has spoken to the other parties and they've planned this, but we're still waiting for Mr. Trudeau to come up and take the podium. Katie, when you look at this election as a whole, when you go home tonight and you think back, okay, so what are the big takeaways here? I think for a lot of people watching, it was a fairly uneventful night. I mean, you look at the national seat count, same seat count we had in 2019. Here on the island, I mean, everybody held onto their seat except for in Nanaimo Ladysmith. That's the one riding. It looks like we're going to have a new MP there. But when you tell someone tomorrow, they go, okay, so how did last night go? What are the big takeaways? What's the big storyline? Mm-hmm. How do you respond?
Can I just go back to the speech for a second?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely you can.
You guys, that was brutal. I have read statistic textbooks out loud with more excitement than that speech that was just delivered. You could tell that it was just radiating with disappointment. And I have to say, I completely agree with Mo's assessment about everyone taking kind of a sober second look and thought about who has the momentum, who is best to take us into the next election. So I know Mo and I may fight like cats and dogs all the time, but I thought he had a great point, so I thought I would give him a shout out there. On the Horgan piece, in addition, I think it's important to highlight that there is a strategy behind Horgan and the Trudeau Liberals. It's imperative if Horgan wants to have this like big tent progressive coalition, he needs to take votes from the BC Liberals. And so I said this a few weeks ago, like their negotiations on these major fundamental projects, like yes, that is important to government, but also politically, he wants to take those centrist voters from the BC Liberals and keep pushing the BC Liberal base smaller and smaller and smaller so he can have the kind of coalition that the BC Liberals had for their 16 years in government. Just wanted to highlight that. In terms of takeaways for this election, this is the Seinfeld election. I still don't know what the ballot proposition solution is.
Right.
It's over, and I don't know why we had it. Like, I think, I was actually saying, like, in the last few days, like, I think the Liberals did manage to grasp onto a narrative with regards to COVID. Like, who do you trust? Like, who's the best leadership to get us through this pandemic? They were highlighting, you know, unvaxxed candidates and stuff. So I thought, like, you know, 3 days before the vote, they figured it out. But, you know, no one really won here. Like, O'Toole won to a certain extent that he held them to a minority. Trudeau won technically because they have the most seats and he gets to live another day as prime minister. Jagmeet's saying, well, the speech speaks for itself. He didn't win anything. He may have picked up 3 seats, but my God, that was depressing. And like poor Annamie Paul and the Green Party, like just harking back to like an hour ago, like I cannot believe that Elizabeth May had the audacity to say that she doesn't believe in the narrative that there was any conflict and turmoil in that party. That is hot, steaming garbage. That is sophistry at its best. So like what do we have here now? Like, we have an 18-month countdown till the next election, till the next really, really expensive election. And I guess we'll see if each party's membership chooses to keep the individual that they brought into this one or to throw it into a leadership race. Like, I guess a leadership race will at least be exciting. But, you know, are we better off as a country? No.
Oh, my gosh.
Maybe the election was the friends we made along the way. Maybe that was the election.
The enemies we made along the way.
Right.
Country's more divided than ever.
Didn't someone said too, I mean, we were asking day one, what's this election about? And they said, if you're still asking 35 days later what this election about, it's probably not a good idea. And that seems to be where we're at, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, we are still waiting for the appearance of Justin Trudeau. It looks like his supporters are gathering and getting ready for him to appear anytime. We do understand that our own Jasmine Bala is standing by with Nikki MacDonald. She, of course, finishing in second place to incumbent Laurel Collins in the Victoria riding. So, Jasmine, what does Nikki MacDonald have to say?
Yeah, you know, it's funny, Nikki just walked in a little while ago, maybe 10 minutes ago, and she came into a roaring applause, even though, of course, you know, we're hearing that Laurel Collins did take back the riding. So, Nikki, tell me how you're feeling. You know, of course, second place is what's kind of projected for you. Of course, all the results aren't in yet, but that's what we're looking at. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm feeling happy because we ran an amazing campaign, and I'm really proud of our volunteers and the work that we did. You know, we've been working on this for 2 years, and building back an amazing team and amazing volunteers. And so it's one of those things where you walk off the field going, yeah, I did my very best. So I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, and you know, in the past few elections, the Liberals have kind of come in third. You know, the Greens usually come out in second. So how are you feeling so far, knowing that you are currently, you know, second, trailing right behind the NDP candidate?
Well, to me, that's a really strong statement about the fact that this riding, for people in this riding, having a solid background in ocean and climate research was important, because that's the #1 issue I heard at the door. People want to talk about climate change. They want to see real action on climate change. I had, as you know, the support of Andrew Weaver. That was a strong signal that people in this riding are looking for, you know, representation of that kind. I know I didn't win, but the fact that we really increased our vote is meaningful. I do believe that.
You know, nationally, we're seeing a Liberal minority government now. How are you feeling about that? It's kind of similar to where you started off. So what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, I had a chance earlier. I was watching the results come in with my family, and really what I think we're seeing is that, which is not surprising, we're in a pandemic. And so what we're seeing is people didn't want change. You know, they wanted to stay with the status quo, what they knew. So they weren't looking for a lot of change, and that's what we got tonight.
Yeah, and you know, you didn't win, but you did make some gains. What's your message to campaign volunteers?
Keep trying, keep working at it. Like, you never know, right? And that's, I've been involved in campaigns all my life. My dad was a member of parliament, so I really literally grew up in politics. And I've seen campaigns win and lost and few votes. So, you know, always get out there, and I think it's the amazing commitment to our democracy, to speaking with voters. That is something that you just, I mean, it's so precious, and I'm really grateful.
And to wrap things up, where do you go from here? What's your next move?
Well, for sure, I'm going to still stay involved in ocean and climate and continue my work on that. I'm not sure what that's going to look like next, but I will be contributing to the battle on climate change, for sure.
All right, thank you so much for taking the time, Nikki. Really appreciate it. Back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you, Jasmine. Rob, I want to bring you in here. One of the things we heard from Nikki MacDonald over the last couple of weeks, obviously we've been covering some of the crime that's come out of the capital city recently, the homeless situation, and she has on record a few times directed that conversation towards City Hall, saying that, look, I think she thought that some of the issues that have surfaced in this city were a result of decisions from Victoria Council. You know, you look at the result, Laurel Collins winning by a big margin there. Do you think that hurt Nikki MacDonald?
Well, it certainly didn't stick to Laurel Collins, this idea that they could somehow link her to Together Victoria, the party she used to be part of municipally, and then kind of cause that to be a negative for Laurel Collins, that she left council, that she sparked a by-election, that she is linked to, that idea of a somewhat controversial municipal party. I think we continue to see this idea that Together Victoria and that wing of the Victoria Council is somehow unpopular, and yet they continue to do well in the polls. They continue to do well in the elections. Laurel Collins did fantastically in this election. So I'm not sure, voters in this riding held that against her at all. It possibly worked out in her favor. Greens, who were looking at the Greens, decided, I like Laurel Collins. I like her leader. I like the party. She's fine. And she's coming out of this in a dominant position. We're not going to look at Victoria next election as a swing riding. This is a New Democrat riding right now that they crushed. And I think that is the message here, is that she owns the riding of Victoria, and the Liberals are going to be hard-pressed to convince us that they have another chance here in the next election.
All right, perhaps we should take a run up and down Vancouver Island and keep folks up to date on what's been happening here. We have one riding left to decide, and that is Nanaimo Ladysmith. But let's take a look at what's happened. Our incumbents, many of them have won, and here is Nanaimo Ladysmith right now. We've got 25 polls left to report, and look at that. It looks like Lisa Marie Barron has increased her lead somewhat. It looks to be, here's the math thing again. It's several hundred votes.
I was just going to...
Stand back, he's doing math.
No. Get the calculator out. No, I was just going to say that, to me, is the biggest margin I think we've seen all night in that riding. So for the first time all night, I mean, it's been going back and forth. Finally, the NDP are pulling away 400 plus votes.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tamara Cronus had been in front for quite a long period of time here. And again, we talk about the mail-in ballots that may play a factor in this close race and other close races across the country and across the province as well. So let's take a look at some other decided ridings. Here we have Saanich Gulf Islands. There's Elizabeth May, 36%, well shy of her nearly 50% in 2019. A good showing, though, for Zubina Singh, who jumped from 4th place to 2nd. And at this point, Elizabeth May, one of 2 Green Party seats.
Yeah, you said it, Stacey. I mean, the only riding we're watching right now is Nanaimo Ladysmith. Incumbents have won every other riding. Esquimalt Saanich Sooke, Randall Garrison. I mean, the other storyline here on the island is the Conservatives' strong showing in many ridings. The Conservatives coming in 2nd, and then the Greens falling behind how they did in 2019. I mean, those are the big takeaways. That's Esquimalt Saanich Sooke. We'll probably jump up to Cowichan, Malahat Langford. There's Alistair McGregor holding on to his seat, and there you see the Conservative in 3rd place, Alana DeLong, or in 2nd place, my apologies.
Yeah, and a big drop-off for Leah Versival as well, who finished considerably better in the 2019 election there. And again, 6%, 2,300 votes for the People's Party and Mark Hecht there. So that's a big jump for that one.
Okay, let's go to Courtney Alberti. Gord Johns, the winner there with 24,000 votes, 44% of the total vote, and almost all the polls are showing there. The Conservatives coming in 2nd, the Liberals in 3rd, and the Greens falling to 4th place. And then if we have North Island, Powell River, we can wrap things up. Rachel Blaney holding on to her seat there. I do want to bring Mo in here and talk about Vancouver Granville. That was a riding that we've been keeping an eye on for most of the night. Jody Wilson-Raybould's riding. Mo, give us an update on that riding.
Not just Jody Wilson-Raybould's riding, the riding where I have a running bet with Rob Shaw for him to eat a plate of Nanaimo bars. It's very important.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies.
I don't remember agreeing to that, but I will agree to it now. That's fine. That's fine.
Joe took the bet on your behalf.
Okay,
he
fair enough.
co-signed it, so it's fine.
A few other bets too. We'll talk about those later.
This is a very close riding. Last I checked, there's about 180 votes separating Anjali Appadore, the NDP candidate, who's in the lead, from the Liberal candidate, Talib Noor Mohammed. 180 votes is nothing. I mean, I just looked at the special mail-in ballots and how many they're expecting there. It's about 5,800. So this is not going to be decided tonight. I think, however, I think the NDP are going to take this as a big win. They sort of came into this as a third-place long-shot candidate. I remember talking to some federal NDP strategists saying, you know, Vancouver Granville is out of reach. You know, that's if we have a really good night, we're going to win that. And I thought the same thing, that this was a bit of a long shot. I took a wild bet on it, but clearly a lot of momentum on Anjali Appadore's side. I think she had a lot of support from former Jody Wilson-Raybould supporters, and I mean people that worked in her campaign supporting her. Obviously, the story here is Talib Noor Mohammed's campaign. I mean, it was supposed to be a shoo-in, but this whole thing about him flipping homes while at the same time hawking a liberal housing plan about curbing speculation really hurt him. I think he handled it poorly. He also was dodging the media, you know, skipping out on all candidates' meetings, kind of nowhere to be found. There was photos of him on social media in his car while his door knockers were out in the neighborhoods. You know, it was not a good look. And from a winning riding to be head-to-head with someone who was really a long shot, this is quite dramatic. Again, I don't think it's going to be decided tonight, but next week, Rob, you won't be eating crow. You'll be eating Nanaimo bars, your favorite.
It doesn't taste as good as crow, but that's fine.
We're going to get emails for that comment. Stop, Rob.
Okay.
We're keeping an eye on Justin Trudeau and his supporters still waiting patiently for him to make an appearance. And given the activity there behind that curtain, it seems like we're getting close to seeing Justin Trudeau address the public. So we talked about some highlights from the campaign. What about lowlights? Was there a crash and burn moment for you, Rob, in this campaign?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question, I guess. There weren't any flat-out fumble moments. There were some candidate problems on the Liberal side. You know, 2 candidates had to bow out due to sexual harassment or other allegations against him that the party had to drop that didn't seem to stick to Trudeau, and he managed to get over them. As I see him walking out here, getting ready to make his speech. We will watch to see what he has to say. He's going to take a congratulatory attitude and a victory lap here, or a more moderate kind of tone in what he plans to say to Canadians, having not achieved the majority that he wanted. But let's have a listen.
Merci, mes amis. Thank you all. You are sending us back to work with a clear mandate to get Canada through this pandemic and to the brighter days ahead. And my friends, that's exactly what we are ready to do. There are still votes to be counted, but what we've seen tonight is that millions of Canadians have chosen a progressive plan. Some have talked about division, but that's not what I see. That's not what I've seen these past weeks across the country. I see Canadians standing together in your determination to end this pandemic, together for real climate action, for $10 a day childcare, for homes that are in reach for middle-class families, for our shared journey on the path of reconciliation. As Canadians, you've elected parliamentarians to deliver on all this, and our team, our government, is ready. Quand je suis devenu Premier ministre il y a 6 ans, je ne pouvais pas savoir ce que l'avenir nous réservait. On ne savait pas que notre pays ferait face à la pandémie du siècle ou à une crise économique mondiale. Ce que je savais déjà, par contre, c'est qu'ensemble, les Canadiens sont capables de surmonter tous les obstacles. Et c'est exactement ce qu'on va continuer de faire. Je vous ai entendu. Ça ne vous tente plus qu'on parle de politique ou d'élection. Vous voulez qu'on se concentre sur le travail qu'on a à faire pour vous. I hear you when you say that you just want to get back to the things you love, not worry about this pandemic or about an election. That you just want to know that your members of Parliament of all stripes will have your back through this crisis and beyond. The moment we face demands real, important change. And you have given this Parliament and this government clear direction. Vous avez fait un choix. Vous avez donné aux parlementaires un mandat clair pour qu'on en finisse avec cette pandémie une bonne fois pour toutes et bâtir un meilleur avenir. Vous avez élu un gouvernement à Ottawa qui va se battre pour vous et qui va livrer pour vous à tous les jours. On vous entend. On vous entend quand vous dites que vous voulez plus de places en garderie et un système de santé encore plus fort, du logement abordable et des bons emplois verts, de continuer d'avancer sur le chemin de la réconciliation, des investissements pour la classe moyenne et pour tous les gens qui travaillent fort pour en faire partie. Mes amis, je suis prêt à poursuivre le travail. Notre équipe est prête. Mais avant tout, ce soir, je veux prendre le temps de remercier quelques personnes. To the leaders of the other parties and their families, thank you for being part of this important moment. Political life isn't easy. This is a path you choose because you believe in serving those around you. Thank you for your service. To the Elections Canada staff and volunteers who signed up to be part of this democratic process and who will be working around the clock to count votes and tally results, thank you. This election has confirmed that our democracy and our institutions remain strong. And to my fellow Canadians, there is no greater honor than serving you and serving this country. If you voted for our party, thank you. Thank you for putting your trust in our team to keep moving forward for everyone. And if you did not vote for us, I want you to know that we will stand up for you and work for you every single day. Because no matter how you voted, just like no matter where you come from, what language you speak, the color of your skin, the way you pray, I hear you. I hear you when you say that we can only move forward if no one is left behind. Our shared future is built vote by vote, door by door, and above all, person by person. That's something I learned when I first ran in Papineau 12 years ago. Durant les 12 dernières années, en tant que député de Papineau, j'ai eu la chance de rencontrer tellement de gens de différents horizons. C'est un honneur pour moi de vous représenter. C'est avec vous que j'ai commencé cette belle aventure. Alors, merci pour votre confiance. Je vais continuer d'être là pour vous, mes chers amis de Papineau. There are a lot of people who've worked hard, very hard, to get here tonight. First off, my fellow Liberals, my friends, congratulations. Whether you're a candidate, staff, or volunteer, I know there have been a lot of late nights and early mornings. There have been tough days, but together we've done something incredible. Bravo, mes amis. Et par-dessus tout, je veux remercier ma famille. I want to thank, as always, my mom, who's here tonight, who started going through election nights like this when she was a little girl, when my grandfather was running for Parliament in Vancouver North. But thank you, Mom, for always being there. Thank you. Et Sophie, il y a 12 ans, quand on a pris la décision de s'impliquer ensemble en politique, c'est parce qu'on voulait défendre nos valeurs, parce qu'on voulait contribuer à bâtir un Canada plus fort. Et depuis tout le début, on l'a fait ensemble. Alors merci. Merci. Et à mes enfants, Xavier et Ella Grace et Adrien qui dort depuis plusieurs heures déjà, comme nous devrions tous, on travaille fort pour vous bâtir un meilleur avenir pour votre génération et les générations futures. À chaque jour, vous me rappelez de ce travail important qu'on est en train de faire ensemble. Alors merci pour votre patience pendant que je dois faire cette job. Et merci pour les sacrifices que vous faites, tous les deux. We've all worked so hard over the last few weeks and over the last few years, and we have come so far. My friends, tonight, I think of something Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier said as his generation was at the dawn of a new century. He said, "Let them look to the past, but let them still more look to the future." Let us not forget the past and the dark days we have come through together, but let us still more look to the future and all that is still to come and all that we have still to build together. Let us feel the warmth of a new dawn, and above all, let us seize the promise of a brand new day. Merci, mes amis. Thank you, my friends. Merci tout le monde.
All right, there you have it. Justin Trudeau with his victory speech, family by his side. We're set to wrap up our election coverage shortly, but first we want to bring in Mo and Katie and Rob for their final thoughts. So why don't we begin with you, Mo? Final thoughts on this election day.
Just a quick note about Prime Minister Trudeau's speech. It feels like he's Matthew McConaughey selling me a Lincoln while I'm sitting in a brand new Lincoln. Like, what was that? I don't... I'm speechless. Like, he's doing this big victory lap over status quo politics, I guess, and I guess that's the Trudeau brand. Here's the reality. Everyone's going home disappointed. It was boring. It was about nothing. There were no real gains. I think all the leaders are probably very disappointed. All the parties are very disappointed with this result. This was a waste of $600 million of your taxpayer money, and people should remember that. You know, yes, it's an absolute privilege to be able to vote, and it's a great right to exercise, but this was a waste of everyone's time. Everyone's disappointed. There was no need for this, and I do hope that people remember this once we get into that next cycle, which could be 6 months, could be 18 months. If we're lucky, maybe it's 4 years. We'll see.
Katie, I have $5 that says you can work Wilfrid Laurier into your final thoughts. Over to you.
Oh man, that is a tall order at 10:30 at night.
Don't worry about it.
I was just going to say, I try to be professional and analytical, but everyone has a ceiling, and I have hit mine because, my God, that speech, the gaslighting, oh my God, we had, I want to highlight a couple things. We have a clear mandate to get Canada through this pandemic. You already had one. You didn't need to ask. Some of you have talked about division, but I haven't seen that across the country. This team literally scheduled their tour stops to maximize the view of protesters across this country. They gleefully pit the vaccinated against the unvaccinated, and finally, they sent the message to all Canadian women that their accusations, their concerns about sexual harassment and sexual assault were just simply them experiencing things differently. So, but you know what? At the end of the speech, or midway through, I don't know, I basically blacked out. He said, if you didn't vote for us, we will work for you. And so I am simply looking forward to seeing that in action. And that's where I'll leave it this evening.
Thank you, Katie. All right, Rob, up to you.
Well, you run a wedge election and you get a wedge result, I guess. This was an election filled with banana peels that Justin Trudeau threw out onto the playing field to trip up his opponents, and he got a result where everyone was wedged on gun control and LGBTQ and abortion and private health care and all sorts of stuff. And in the end, we come back to just COVID. And he says he has a clear mandate to get through the pandemic. I agree with Katie. I don't understand what that means, but I guess what it means is the moment we're through this pandemic, the moment we finish our 4th or 5th or 6th wave, we are heading to another election with this idea of now we need to look to the future. Maybe we look to the future too fast and we're still here in the present. But one day in the future, we'll look to the future, and that will be the future election in the 12 or 18 months it takes to get there.
Oh my gosh, well, this is only the 4th time in history a federal election has happened under a full moon, and I'm not sure what impact that had on things. Yeah, a bit of a Twilight Zone vibe to things going on this evening for sure. All right, Joe, why don't we take one last look at who won on the island? So we'll run through them, starting in Victoria. Laurel Collins, the incumbent there, Saanich Gulf Islands, Elizabeth May, Esquimalt, Saanich, Souk, Randall Garrison,
Cowichan, Malahat, Langford, Alistair McGregor, Courtney Alberni, Gord Johns, North Island, Powell River, Rachel Blaney. And this is the one riding, though, folks, that we are still watching, and it looks like the NDP have picked up one more seat on Vancouver Island. It's not over yet. There's still 15 polls to go, but Lisa Marie Barron has pulled ahead of Tamara Cronus, and again, this lead just continues to grow. We will continue to update this online, checknews.ca. You can go there, follow us on Twitter, and of course, tomorrow we're going to have full reaction to everything you witnessed tonight, including reaction from many of our MPs that are going back to Ottawa.
All right, and before we sign off, one last look at our national picture. Here we have the Liberal minority, 158 seats for Justin Trudeau, 121 for Erin O'Toole and the Conservatives, 31 for the Bloc, 26 for the NDP, and 2 for the Green Party leading and elected.
And I just want to say before we thank you for being here, thank you to our panel tonight. Let's bring Mo and Katie back in here one more time just so we can see them. Thank you two, for joining us from Vancouver. I know it was a long day for you, but we just love your insight and your analysis. And I know that if we walked away, you guys could just go at it all night long. Actually, the viewers might like that. That might be good TV. So thank you for being here, both of you.
Yes, thank you, Katie.
Anytime.
Mo.
It was so much fun.
And Rob, as well as our CHEK team in the field, our live reporters, along with the photographers there with them, everybody in the control room. It takes a village to put on an election show, ladies and gentlemen. So on behalf of Joe Perkins, our great team here, myself, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and stay tuned. We'll have more reaction coming up tomorrow on CHEK News. Good night.
Joining us today from holidays, you hear them almost every night on